Just
Microphone's up. Good to go.
good afternoon. No. Good evening. Welcome to this meeting of South Cambridge District Council Scrutiny and Overview Committee. My name is Councillor Stephen Drew and I am Chair of this committee. May I make a few housekeeping announcements? Those present, including any members of the public observing or any public speakers, are asked to note that this meeting is being filmed and live streamed. By your presence, you are deemed to have consented to be filmed and to the use of those images and sound recordings for a webcast. May I please remind members that when speaking, they should not disclose any personal information of any individual, as this might infringe the rights of that individual and breach the Data Protection Act. Please make sure your microphones are switched off unless you're invited to speak. For those participating remotely, when you're invited to address the meeting, please make sure your microphone and camera are switched on, and then when you finish addressing the meeting, please turn your microphone off again. Please, for members who are attending remotely, indicate a wish to speak through a chat message in the Teams meeting. Those present in the chamber should indicate their wish to speak by raising their hand. I will ask the Vice Chair to note the order of speakers, both virtually and in the room. Committee members present in the chamber, I will now invite each of you to introduce yourselves. Members, after I call your name, please introduce yourself and say which ward you represent. As I said earlier, my name is Councillor Stephen Drew and I am one of the members for Camborne. My Vice Chair is Councillor Graham Cone.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm one of the members for the Fenditton and Fulbourn ward.
Councillor Anna Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the one of the three members for Milton and Waterbeach ward.
Thank you. Councillor Sue Ellington.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Sue Ellington and I'm responsible for Swavesey ward.
Councillor Sally Ann Hart.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Sally Ann Hart. I'm one of the two members for the Melbourne ward.
Councillor James Hobro.
Good evening, my name is James Hobro and I'm Councillor for Foxton ward.
Councillor Helen Leeming.
Good evening, I'm Helen Leeming. I'm one of the members for Camborne ward.
Councillor Richard Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. Richard Stobart. I'm one of the members for Girton ward. This includes the villages of Dry Drayton and Madingley.
And Councillor Heather Williams.
Good evening, Chair. I'm Heather Williams and I represent the Mordens ward.
Thank you. Are there any other members present, either in the chamber, I do not believe so, or online? I believe Councillors Libby Earle, Peter Fane and John Lovelock, committee members. It says you're online. I was simply reading through, John. I hadn't noted. My apologies. Well, no, that's fine. I only looked that way. So, to pause back, instead of just reading through my script, we shall come back. Councillor John Williams.
Hello, I'm Councillor John Williams. I'm one of the councillors for Fenditton and Fulbourn ward. I'm also the lead cabinet member for resources.
Thank you very much. My apologies. And councillors are online. So, let's stop. Councillor John Lovelock.
Thank you, Chair. I am John Lovelock, one of the members for Cottenham and Rumpton.
And Councillor Peter Fane.
Evening, Chair. Peter Fane, member for Shelford.
Okay. I believe that is all the members of the committee who are present. And now we'll move on to other councillors who are present. So, Councillor Bill Handley.
Oh, hello. Councillor Bill Handley, one of the members for Over and Willingham.
And Councillor Brian Milnes.
Good evening, Brian Milnes, Deputy Leader. Thank you.
And Councillor Bridget Smith.
Good evening, Councillor Bridget Smith, member for Gamlingay and Council Leader.
Okay, so based on those in the chamber and those I can see online, I believe that is all the councillors that we have present. So we also have several officers in the chamber, first of all. Anne Ainsworth, would you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm Anne Ainsworth. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Council.
And Peter Maddock.
I'm Peter Maddock. I'm the Chief Finance Officer.
Ian Senior.
I'm Ian Senior. I'm Scrutiny and Governance Advisor.
And Aaron Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Democratic Services Technical Officer.
Okay, and online we have Liz Watts.
Good evening, everyone. Liz Watts, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Liz. I'm sure we know what you said, but just so you're aware, you were very quiet.
Apologies, Chair. Is that any better?
Oh, much better. Thank you very much.
Liz Watts, Chief Executive.
Thank you. And Jeff Membry?
Thank you, Chair. Jeff Membry, Head of Transformation, HR and Corporate Services.
Okay, and Kevin Ledger?
Good evening, Kevin Ledger, Senior Policy and Performance Officer.
Okay, and Alex Snelling-Day?
Hi, Alex Day, Head Waste Policy, Climate and Environment Team Manager.
Thank you. And Michael Parsons?
Hi, I'm Waste Operations Manager for the Shared Waste Service.
Okay. I believe I also see Peter Campbell.
Yes, hello, Peter Campbell, Head of Housing.
Okay. I think that's everyone. Yes, we are in agreement that we have covered all the officers, so thank you very much. Unless anybody wishes to flag themselves having missed out, well, I would follow my pattern from earlier. I can confirm that the meeting is quorate, there being at least 4 committee members here in the chamber. If at any time a member leaves the meeting, would they please make that fact known to me so it can be recorded in the minutes. Finally, please note a small correction at item 11 in the agenda, work programme. The investment strategy is now scheduled to go to Cabinet in February next year, so will be considered by this committee on the 19th of January 2023, rather than on the 15th of December. So item number 2 is apologies. Ian, do we have any apologies for absence?
We don't.
No, thank you very much. Actually, I can give the apologies for Councillor van der Weyer, who apologised to me yesterday for his absence. So, declarations of interest. Members are required to declare the existence and nature of any interest which affects or relates to any item of business to be considered. If the interest becomes apparent during the meeting, then the member should bring it to the attention of officers at that time. Do any members have interest to declare in relation to any item of business on this agenda? Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to item 9, that is as a result of the motion that I brought for Council.
Thank you very much. Any other councillor colleagues online? I do not see any. I see no other councillors in the chamber. Thank you. If an interest subsidy becomes apparent later in the meeting, please raise it at that point. Item number 4 is the minutes of the last meeting. These have been distributed in advance. Is there anything anybody wishes to raise in relation to these minutes? I do not see any objections or anything else being raised or any comments. Therefore, I would hope to be able to take by affirmation that we consent to these being a true and accurate record in our minutes. Colleagues, do we agree? Thank you very much. I will therefore sign. And if you be so kind as to pass to Ian. Thank you very much. Public questions. There are no public questions or statements for this meeting. Thank you very much. And if you just bear with me 1 moment while my laptop turns back on, so I can now look at the rest of the agenda. Okay, excellent. Thank you. So, item number 6 on the agenda is the 2022 to 2023 Q2 Performance Report. Councillors, are there any questions we wish to raise regarding this? Who would like to go first? Councillor Ellington?
Might as well start things off.
Well, Councillor Ellington, you are the one who has volunteered to go first, so the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm looking initially at page 10, I believe. It's very difficult because it's sort of mixed up with something else. Yes, page 10. And we're looking here at the performance indicator and organised by service area in relation to business rates collected. Now, I believe that the target is roughly 50% because it's 2/4 of a 4-quarter year. But I do feel that it doesn't really represent any of the issues that may be important for us to be considering. That the number of people who, businesses that are not paying their council business rates is not really evident. It doesn't give us a feel of how much work needs to be done in order to help those businesses which must be struggling in this particular year. And I just wanted to bring that up.
Councillor Williams in the first instance.
Could you explain exactly what you would like us to do then?
Councillor Ellington. No. Councillor Ellington, I wonder if...
Maybe use first names, it gets confusing between.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wonder, I think perhaps John is suggesting that he is slightly unsure of exactly what it is that you're asking him. I sense that you are asking him that, although it shows us the percentage of businesses who have paid up to this point, it perhaps doesn't present us with a clear and accurate picture of the actual level of problems that businesses are facing with the current potential economic problems that they have. So therefore, I think it's more of a general question, as far as I understood it from our conversation last night.
Yes.
Regarding the extent to which either officers or yourself, Councillor John Williams, can say what we think the kind of state of businesses in the local area is regarding their ability to pay their business rates.
Okay, well, you know, we have given businesses an enormous amount of help, particularly during the COVID period. Businesses have, by and large, in our district, kept up with their business, the business tax payments. What I wanted to try and find out is, what are you expecting us to identify businesses that are struggling? Because obviously we give here the overall figure, which shows that it's on target. So to get the sort of picture that you are looking for, we would need to drill down and look at individual businesses, presumably. Is that what you're asking us to do?
No, I'm not certainly asking for individual names of companies. I think it just doesn't reflect the state of our businesses in South Cambs. And it says 39.9% were paid out of 40. But I don't get a feeling about what that represents. Is that £1 million that we're short of, or?
That's in FS 105, not FS 104, which is the business rates. I think Councillor Ellington meant.
Give me 1 second. Okay, so from the conversation we had in our pre-scrutiny meeting, talking about these kind of figures here, again, so I'll have a go at kind of seeing whether or not my understanding is different to yours and different to John's, because that may well be helpful. I think the point that was getting at in terms of the discussion is this thing that at the moment, the figures seem to be on track. So for September, the target was 59.78, and we're at 59.8. And on an immediate surface reading, it could be taken as a very positive thing, which kind of reflects what you've just said yourself there, Councillor Williams, where you've said, you know, that businesses have managed to keep up and a lot of support was given during COVID. But I got the impression from the conversation that was had that councillors were perhaps having conversations with businesses in the local areas where, you know, concern was being expressed by businesses that perhaps they were having a hard time, that they were finding it difficult maybe to stay afloat at times. And I think really what we're getting at here is whether or not from the council, the business rates that are being collected, about whether or not either yourself as the relevant officer, the relevant council member, or the officers are of the opinion that there are likely to be growing problems, or whether actually things look as healthy as perhaps they can be expected to be. And that's without drilling down to individual business level. I think it's more of a sense of what do we consider the health of the businesses within the district to be based on this information. Yeah, Peter, absolutely happy for you to answer.
Through you, Chair, yeah. So as things stand at the moment, we are seeing business rates payments in line with expectations and in line with the target. I am aware that we have had a little bit more contact from businesses around the issue. So I think the point we're making is that there's obviously potential for things to perhaps fall short of the target. We're not seeing any evidence of that at the moment. However, we are aware that we are having more contact from businesses. So I think the point's well made. I think businesses probably are struggling a bit more than they would do. But we're not actually seeing that come through in terms of people not paying at the moment. But that's, I'm not suggesting, we may see some, as time goes by and things potentially get worse, we may see that happen. And I think there's just a little bit of a warning there that we might see that happening towards the end of the financial year.
So really quite a healthy South Cambs.
Yes, I think, you know, it's quite a positive picture. And I think, if I'm honest, it's probably a bit better than we might have feared, if I put it that way. Okay.
Councillor Arlington, are you happy for us to move on?
Chair, can I just ask?
Of course, sorry, Councillor John.
If you do know of any businesses who are struggling, who need support, then ask them to get in touch with our business development team.
Excellent. Yes. Excellent. Are you happy for me to move on? Yeah, good. Councillor Heather Williams, you are next up.
Thank you, Chair. Mine was mainly in relation to the conversation that's just gone on about a way of trying to square the circle at times. I think the crux of the information that would be really helpful for the council is to separate those who are not being able to pay because of financial difficulties and those who are just not paying. And that we must have a sort of a level for that. So we're just taking on board what Councillor Ellington was saying. That's what I took from it, is there will always be some that are just not paying, and then there are others that have genuine reasons why. And perhaps actually as time goes on, as we see what happens, we'll say the figures are much better than I think we could have hoped for, and that's fantastic. But actually what we don't want to do is see figures drop and us not really understand why, potentially, because there's so many different things going on for businesses. So a separation potentially going forward, or a new KPI in relation to that, I think may help to square the circle of the conversation that's just happened, Chair. I think my personal question was around, in the housing and property services, we don't seem to be able to sort of progress further on about the relet of all the housing stock.
Sorry, sorry, Councillor, do you want to tell us which number you're referring to? Sorry, because otherwise...
Page 13.
Page 13, yeah, okay, thank you.
It is L211. One down the bottom of the page, sorry, we've got the stamp on the number. So, have you found it yet, Anna? Do you want me to wait? Average days to relet all housing stock. Are you good? Are you good? Okay. So one of the things it says about electrical meters, and I just want to understand a bit more around that, because that worried me a bit with cost of living, that meant that the potentially the usage wasn't being calculated correctly. So just some clarity around what it is with the electrical meters that's causing the hold up, and whether we've considered looking, although we need a specialist contractor, I assume that's a special type of electrician that we need, whether we've actually looked at being able to source more things, because it seems a very small thing to be holding up council houses when we've got so many people on the housing list. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you very much. In the absence of Councillor Batchelor, I'm going to go to Peter Campbell in the first instance, please.
Yeah, hi, pleased to deal with this. Yes, the performance on the relays
isn't improving as quickly as we want it to. But we need to reflect that this, for the period shown, is the final quarter of the old contract, where we're putting re-lets out to a number of contractors. The new contract, a continuation with Mears, offers more focus on re-lets and voids. And certainly Eddie Spicer as service manager is putting additional pressure on Mears to make sure that they play their part in the process. We're also recognise that re-lets are one part of the service, one part of our service that involves many different people, housing management, allocations, and repairs inspectors, etc. We're also going through a process akin to a business process re-engineering step to make sure there is no wasted steps or duplication in the work that we do. And I'm fairly confident that those two steps, the new contract with Mears and the work that we're doing internally, will improve performance moving on. It's also relevant that we're members of benchmarking clubs, and many authorities across the country are also suffering problems with re-lets. We're not alone in this, but we recognise there's still work to do. In response to the specific question about the electric meters, if there's anything further to add, I'll report back after speaking to Eddie Spicer.
Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. So I didn't quite catch the end of what Mr. Campbell said. So my concern is about whether it's people, having to pay bills that they don't need to if the meters aren't right. What is that specific problem with the meters?
Yeah, I'm not aware that there's an issue with people having to pay more council, but I'm also not sure about the specific details about these meters. So outside this meeting, I will speak to Eddie Spice, the service manager, and provide a written response.
Sorry, Councillor John Williams, you have something to add?
No, but this is void, so there isn't anyone in the property.
No, I get that.
Sorry, Councillor Williams, your microphone needs to go on as well.
I understand what you were saying about it being a void property, but there's the resident beforehand that's had this electric meter, and we're saying that there is some sort of problem with the electrical meters. So that didn't just happen as soon as the person vacated the property, all of a sudden it became void and then there was an issue. Until we know exactly what that issue is, it's hard to tell who potentially got affected. That's all I'm saying, Councillor John Williams.
Okay, great, thank you. Councillor Heather Williams, are you happy for me to move on from that question?
I am, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peter Fain, you are next up on the questions.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to development management, page 11, items PN 510 to 512. This is the number of applications determined within the relevant period, 13 weeks in respect of major applications or 8 weeks in respect of others. Now, the issue for me is that on some occasions we tend to grant or agree extensions with the applicants if we're not able to meet the timeline, the original timeline. So it isn't really apparent from this the extent to which, as it says here, we continue to make progress in reducing the backlog. And I just feel we may need to have some way of monitoring how many applications are met within the original timeline and how many are met within one or more extensions. And also in relation to PN 512, appeals against major planning permissions refused. That is where the appeal has allowed planning permissions we had refused. There have been a couple of cases I'm aware of where appeals were granted against non-determination. And I'm just wondering whether those appeals would be counted within these figures. Can I say, Chair, that I know that neither Councillor Hawkins nor the Director of Planning Present, at least I
Stephen
believe
Kelly
so.
is actually now in the meeting, Councillor Fane.
I don't know whether he had the opportunity to hear the question.
Yes, he is nodding
but I'd
to
be very
say that
happy
he
for it to be
has.
dealt with later otherwise.
Excellent. So, Stephen Kelly, if you could both introduce yourself and answer Councillor Fane's question, that would be marvellous. Thank you.
Hello, yes, Stephen Kelly, I'm the Joint Director of Planning. Thank you for your question. If I deal with the simple answer, Councillor Fane, in respect of the question, does it include non-determination appeals? I'd have to come back to you, but the level of appeals, 2 or 3 non-determination appeals that you referred to, because this is against total number of applications metric, and we deal with around 6,000 applications a year, I suspect is unlikely to impact the. This indicator is related to government performance standards, given how far below the threshold we are. Is unlikely to impact that, but I can. I'm afraid I'm going to have to provide clarity about that in writing afterwards. In terms of your question around the non-major applications, and whether they include applications within agreed timelines or 8 weeks. I can't answer the question about how many have had extensions of time, but the service is now plotting the average time for all applications against lower and upper quartile measures. And so I'm sorry, because I'm working from one screen. If I can just, for myself, click to another screen, I can try and answer that question. So our lower quartile minor on-hand analysis, Chair, I don't know whether it's appropriate for me to share my screen, but I've got a chart that will perhaps reassure Peter Fane, Councillor Fane, sorry, in this manner. If there's no objection, I'd propose just to share an image. Fine. Please bear with me. So this is an abstract from the analysis of quartile performance in terms of the number of applications on hand. Sorry, and what I'm going to do, sorry, is this is the graph I was looking for. So what we're now tracking is on-hand applications in terms of the average number of days against upper and lower quartile performance with a median. Now, what you will see from the falling upper quartile performance is from December 2021, for example, we've begun work with a backlog team in terms of trying to bring down the backlog of applications. And I've got separate numbers around that. But what this graph hopefully shows is that because we are clearing out those long-standing older cases, that we're getting the upper, lower and median quartile performance closer to one another, which is an indication of improving consistency, but also of progressive reduction in the average number of days for all decisions, which reflect the ambition to reduce delays in the decision-making process. Now, I can't from that distill how many of those applications were within time, but in fact, I've been having a conversation with my colleague today, Matt Hull, who produces these tables, to see whether or not we can distill further from that the application, those applications which are within an agreed timescale with applicants, sometimes looking for amendments and so on, and those applications which fall outside of an agreed timescale. I hope that it doesn't directly answer Councillor Fane's question, but I hope that the positive trend in the performance around that is clear for everyone to see, and they can feel some reassurance. If it's helpful, I can return to a subsequent meeting to explain that. Thank you.
Councillor Peter Fane, are you content for us to move on?
Very much so, Chairman. That's reassuring. I think perhaps this is a matter that we ought to find some way of keeping an eye on to see progress developed. Thank you.
Okay, I have Councillor Ellington and then Councillor Heather Williams in relation to this. I then have Councillor Cone. So Councillor Ellington first of all.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm really pleased to see these figures are reducing, but perhaps the figure that we don't have is how long it takes for an application to be validated. And the figures that we have here, as I understand it, are established from when the application is officially validated rather than from the date it is put into the office to be decided upon. So I just feel we ought to have another set of figures which show how many people haven't been validated, because I believe that can be quite a substantial length of time.
Stephen Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. Bear with me a second. I have that information, I think, in terms of the current position, but of course, as the Q2 report, there will be a lag. We're obviously tracking in terms of our indicator around validation performance, that there are still challenges in that area. In fact, it should be amber, not green, on page 12, because it is at 12 days against our 10-day target. But if you just bear with me a moment, I'm sorry, I'm trying to talk and do two things at once. I should be able to give you information on validation. Which is still an area of challenge, but bear with me a second. I will share my screen with you once again. So you can see we have a target for validation within 5 working days. We're not achieving that performance at this moment in time. We're some way away from that, but we are putting in place measures to improve the performance and bring us back to that. The issue that I've highlighted today, and which we can come back to members on, is clearly our target of our objective around 10 days as an average time is not being met. But I'm trying to determine how many of these applications which fall outside the 5-day timescale are substantially in excess of 10 days. The team have currently got a backlog that they are working through. If you bear with me, I will try and see if I can get Monday's figures for you to give an indication of what that looks like as of Monday this week. But one second.
While Stephen's just finding that, I would also draw members' attention to table PN519, which is on that page, is on page 12, which is obviously also relevant to the point that Councillor Ellington has raised regarding the length of time taken to determine and validate household planning applications. So there is data within the pack as well, but obviously the data Stephen's able to provide is greater and more specific and live, as he's referencing at the moment.
Chair, I think it's probably because I'm trying to sift through the emails. I'm trying not to hold up the meeting.
Okay.
I think it's probably best if I provide a written answer to that question, but it's certainly something that we're actively focusing on at the moment.
Okay, great. Councillor Ellington, are you happy to move on? And I have Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Can be a mouthful. So on this same topic that Councillor Fane has raised, I do recall back in 2019, and I know that because Peter Topping was the person that asked it, when we were looking at terror requests coming in, it was asked about having a KPI, something that showed how reliant we were on extensions of time into meeting those KPIs. At that point, if recollection serves me well, it was very difficult for us to know actually, because everything was done quite informally, how many applications were extensions and how many were on time and how many was this, that and the other. And at that point, it was said that there was going to be a system sort of put in place. Sharon Brown said there'd be a system put in place so that we could try and obtain this data. Obviously, we're quite a far way on, and we've had COVID and everything else since then. But it does make me wonder the question, with extension of times, the fact that they're still not being reported as has repetitively been requested, is that because we simply don't know? Or do we know right now how many extensions of time have been agreed and that we rely on, or do we just simply still not know? Because if we don't know, Chair, I think that's a concern, because how can we judge really, truly our performance?
Thank you. Stephen Kelly.
So we do know, we don't report it as part of this KPI data set. The thing that we're moving towards, though, which is following conversations we've had with Department of Levelling Up Communities and Housing, is that we are moving towards more of a focus about the average time taken to deal with applications, because the extension of time process allows for an almost indefinite period for you to determine an application, running into many, many years. And what we're focused on is how long it takes people to get a planning permission in terms of the number of days. So although so our performance digest, which I shared with you just now, is focused actually really hard, and our energy and focus with our staff is focused really clearly on reducing the total number of days in an application rather than just extensions of time, because actually the extensions of time is no measure of whether or not our residents or our businesses are actually getting decisions any quicker. It's just a measure of whether or not procedurally we have gone through a process that makes the statistics look good. So on a qualitative basis, what people have told us is important is getting a positive decision as soon as possible. And it's for that reason that, as I shared you, our upper, lower and medium performance analysis of timescales for decisions is our focus. But we do have data, and indeed the system can report on those applications with an extension of time, but it's not been our focus more recently, because people have stressed to us that they're concerned about the total time that's taken, not the number of times we're good at extending the permission. But I can't give you that data now, because I just need to run a report on it to give you a contemporary answer to the question. But it's certainly an answer that we can provide if we need to, if that's what's asked for. It's just not part of our current performance metric set, because we're trying to focus those performance metrics on those things that we think add the most value to the user and to our residents.
Thank you. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that no one particular data set will ever suffice every need, but that is something, the reliance on extensions of time is something that's been asked repetitively over the years. So I, for one, would be very pleased to see how many extensions of time on a monthly basis we've done over the last couple of years, because that way we can have an assessment as to whether the information that is in front of us today is within the statutory time frame or not. And I think Councillor Ellington's points on validation is really quite important as well, because obviously the longer that process takes, the more pressure it puts on then the case officers to determine the applications even quicker, and we still want to do site notices and everything else to go through. So it's not one piece of information will resolve everything, appreciate that, but now we know it exists, please could we have it? Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Can I make a suggestion that Councillor Cohn and myself when preparing for the next time that this report will be published to us, we'll take an action to have this conversation in more detail with relevant Cabinet member and senior officer in order to attempt to deliver upon what you have requested there.
Thank you, Chair. May you succeed where others have not been able to.
Oh, and Stephen, yes, Stephen Kelly again.
Yes, just quickly on Councillor Ellington's point. I'm sorry I didn't deal with this. The validation backlog doesn't make any difference to the total length of time that the application is recorded. The application, if it's validated, but it takes us 3 weeks to do it, the start date for the clock is the day it was received by us, not the day we validated it. So just to offer reassurance that that backlog doesn't adversely affect the experience of users or the way that we report it. It's all reported back to the day it's received as valid. In respect of the information on extensions of time, I suppose the only thing I would say is it's not one of our corporate indicators, but I'm more than happy to provide some further information on it. It's not that we failed to provide it in this report, it's that with respect, I haven't been asked for it, and if I'm asked for it, I can provide it. But Chair, with your assistance, perhaps we can make sure we have that information for the next meeting if it's important.
Kind of bring the matter to a close in terms of the meeting is really to say that myself as chair and Graham as vice chair would take it as an action to try to bring resolution to it. Councillor Cohn, you are actually down as next. Unless Councillor Bradnam wishes to talk about something related to the current topic, which she does. Are you happy for Councillor Bradnam? Councillor Bradnam?
Thank you very much, Chair and Vice Chair. I just wanted to observe that I may be missing something here, but extensions of time are normally requested by, for example, parish councils, if they haven't had a chance to respond within the normal time frame, because of the timing of their meetings, or by residents for reason of whatever, that they were not able to respond within the time frame. And so I'm just wondering if actually we're trying to look at the wrong thing. I'm not disputing that the work might be done. But the other thing is, as I understand it, extensions of time are always agreed by the applicant. So
sorry, Councillor Bradnam, can I support you for a second? I think some of the people online are struggling to hear you. I don't know if you could bring your microphone closer to you.
Certainly.
Thank you.
I'll just summarise then. Sorry, so my observation is that extensions of time are usually asked for by parish councils who haven't had a time to respond because of the timing of their meetings, or by residents who, for one reason or another, have not had an opportunity to respond within the normal time frame. And thirdly, they're almost always they are in agreement with the applicant. So my concern is that whilst I'm perfectly happy for you to take the action that you agreed, I'm just wondering if it's trying to obtain the information which is useful. And also what did occur to me, it might be useful to clarify if there are any occasions when the authority seeks an extension of time because they are unable to get information from a statutory stakeholder or something like that. So it might be helpful to distinguish between extensions of time that are approved by the applicant and extensions of time that have been asked for or needed by the planning authority. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I assume there isn't a particular question that you require Stephen to answer from that.
It was just for clarification of what was trying to be achieved.
That's great, thank you very much. Councillor Heather Williams, do you wish to comment further in relation to this topic?
Thank you. I think it might help is I'm not asking about extensions of time to consultation. What Councillor Bradnam said about parish councils, often you have the 21-day consultation that they will ask an extension for, but not the determination date itself. And what the purpose of requesting this information is to assess, are we fulfilling our statutory duty and how successfully are we doing that by what's being said. Yes, people may agree to an extension of time has to be agreed to by both parties. I don't say that it's not, but equally we need to know how reliant we are on that process and how many applications we are determining within the guidelines and the processes that are legislated for. So that would be the purpose of it. Thank you, Chair.
Unless anyone else has anything else to say in relation to that moment, I would like to thank Councillor Peter Fain for starting us off on a road that has clearly caused great interest for councillors and has given us the opportunity to hear from Stephen Kelly in great detail and to see some more of his graphs that weren't originally in the report. I think for me that represents a really good example of councillors and officers being able to engage in great detail for the benefit of residents. Councillor Cohn, it is now your turn, as it were.
Thanks very much, Chair. I've just got two very quick points on the report. The first is on page 13 about the re-lettings and the timescales on that. I think we've discussed in previous meetings whether these timescales are realistic or not. So I just wanted maybe the housing team just to comment on, whether those figures are set by us or by an external body, i.e. the 17 days for turnaround of those properties. And the second point was on page 17 about the complaints resolved. Obviously that they are improving, and that's a really good thing and something that we'd asked for at the last scrutiny meeting and commented on. So it's really good to see that those complaints are improving. Obviously what we'd like to see is all complaints handled within the relevant timescales, because it's so important that if someone does complain that they're dealt with. So really the question around that is, I'm glad to see those improving, but have we put things in place to make sure that that is consistent across the year and those complaints continue to be dealt with in a timely fashion?
So your first question struck me as related to housing specifically. Okay, so I go to Peter Campbell for the first one related to housing.
Yeah, I'm very pleased to answer this. In short, we're not sure. So at the moment, so what we're doing is doing some more research in our benchmarking group to find out how other organisations are performing. What I don't want is to recast the performance targets just because we're failing. I want it to be realistic, and I want it to be challenging against other organisations. So I want to do some background research to see what how other organisations are doing, and set a target that's realistic but challenging, based on that information rather than just in isolation.
Okay, thank you. Is that okay?
Yeah, thanks. So my understanding is that we set the figure of 17 days.
Yeah, yes, yeah. It's an internal target. Yes.
Okay, but you'll compare us against other councils to see if that is something that we are doing correctly in terms of timescales.
Yes, we want to make sure that what we have is roughly in line with similar organisations of a similar type, similar rurality, etc. So something's realistic but still a challenge.
I mean, it just seemed quite a quick turnaround at 17 days, but if
Okay, and there was a second question that you asked there, Councillor Cohn. Second question, Councillor Cohn, is obviously related to complaints procedures. Councillor Smith, I wonder if we could come to you in relation to Councillor Cohn's second question, which was about the extent to which we are seeking, as a council as a whole, to ensure the maximum number of complaints are dealt with as quickly as possible. I was wondering if that's... I wasn't entirely sure which cabinet member to go to, Councillor Smith, so I'm thinking I'll go to you as leader in the first instance.
That's fine. All complaints, and if they're not dealt with, they end up in my inbox. So Jeff Membry has been doing a vast amount of work to really transform the way that both the way we deal with complaints and the speed which we deal with them. So if I think back to 5 years ago, there was a lot of confusion where sort of service requests were logged as complaints and complaints were logged as service requests. I think those late days are long gone. So I'm going to ask, so this has been an absolute priority for us, because even though when you think about how many bins we collect on a weekly basis and so on, one or two complaints is relatively insignificant within those numbers, but actually it's really significant to the person making the complaint. So if you would forgive me deferring to Jeff, who will be able to actually talk with more detail about this, I would appreciate that.
That's fine. Thank you, Councillor Smith. Jeff Membry.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Yes, we've put in place a series of complaints champions within each of the services that meet regularly to discuss what's happening with complaints. We have a corporate complaints champion who keeps on top of what's going on with complaints as they come in and identifies any potential issues. We're improving the complaints system that we've got so that it starts to flag up complaints that are getting close to the date we'd expect them to be resolved, so that we can start to identify those corporately. And I get regular updates from services about how complaints are doing. Funny enough, I had some updates this morning from Housing and Planning, for example, confirming that things were still running smoothly. I'm afraid I can't guarantee that in every single case no complaint ever drifts over the targets, because we do occasionally get the odd very complex complaints that we find difficult to respond to in sort of the 10 or the 20 days, but the vast majority of them are being turned around in a appropriate time at the moment. Hope that's helpful.
Yes. I'm sorry, I've pressed the button on my screen that makes it look like it wants to log off, and I don't know how to get rid of it. It's gone now. Thank you very much. Excellent. Apologies. Thank you for your answer. Councillor Cohn.
Thanks very much for your answer.
Marvellous. Great. Thank you very much. Which brings us on to Councillor Sally Ann Hart.
Thank you, Chair. I've waited because my questions relate to the final page and the penultimate page of the report regarding the contact centre. And having used the contact centre a few times, feel pleased to see that the level in terms of what's resolved first time, and a number of mine have been, and some of the residents that I've been working with. I just wanted to get some clarification on CC 303, when it says calls to the contact centre that are handled, in brackets answered. Does answered actually mean speaking to a person, or when the caller requests a callback?
Thank you. Jeff Membry, I think.
Thank you, Jeff. Through you. It means when they actually speak to a person. So these are the calls that are actually answered by a call handler, and they speak to them.
Thank you. So I'm just wondering, I mean, certainly been trying to encourage people to use the callback facility, because obviously mindful of busy times. I'm just wondering, going forward, we might be able to have some data on how often that is requested, how often that's used, people take advantage of that, and then if there's a way of measuring how long it takes for people to get the call back. Would that be possible?
Yes, certainly. We can get that information and put it in future reports. Sorry, through you, Chair.
Thank you.
Councillor Hart, you happy to move on? Thank you very much. Councillor Leaming.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask about the KPI on page 18, please, CC 307. This is the average call answer time. I was wondering whether the issue in regards to the energy rebate scheme is going to be an ongoing pressure for the call handling team throughout the winter, or whether this is a timing issue, and whether there is enough resilience in the team.
Jeff Membry.
Thank you, Chair, again, through you. We anticipate a high level of demand continuing throughout the winter. We were particularly unfortunate that over the quarter that we're talking about, we also, at the same time as having these high volume of inquiries, had an issue where we had to recruit some additional staff. We lost some staff, unfortunately. we have got a lot of information about the calls that are coming in. The really interesting thing is it's not that we're not hitting target most days we are, and actually even within particular days where we're not hitting target, for most of that day we're hitting target. What we're beginning to see is that we're getting trends of high volumes of calls at particular times on particular days. So for example, if some letters go out about an energy rebate scheme, we'll get a lot of calls between, say, on a Monday morning between 9 and 10. And that's what's causing us quite a lot of these issues. We've got enough people to manage the calls over the course of a day, but actually we're finding that at particular times we're getting heavily hit. Now that data is particularly useful because we're going to use that to try and be better at predicting when high volume calls are coming into to the council, so that we can plan our resourcing of the contact centre better by doing that. At the moment, they're irritatingly avoiding a pattern, apart from knowing that when we do a mass write-out, that's going to generate some additional calls. But as we get more and more information, we're able to refine that in more detail. I'm confident that if we use our resources to the best of their ability, we've got enough resource in the contact centre. What we need to make sure that we're doing is using the data to maximise the way that we're using that resource. That probably will take a little bit of time, which is why we're predicting the next quarter figure for that indicator to also be amber. I think it is worth saying at this point that although it's not what we aspire to, I think if you're looking at a lot of organisations, they'd be very envious of our 2-minute answering times that we're getting. Amber, certainly I know when I phone my bank, I tend to wait an awful lot longer than 2 minutes, but we're very focused on getting back to being able to answer all of our calls within the target time, and we've got the technology to help us get towards that. I hope that's a helpful answer.
Councillor Leeming.
Thank you. Yes, it is indeed a helpful answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stobart.
Chair, thank you. My question concerns ES418, which is a performance indication around recycling volumes. Just let me turn it up. It's on page 16 of the agenda. That's page 22 of the page 22 of the PDF. So my question is this. So recycling volumes, particularly for green bins, were down, and that hence the amber indication. But what happened over the summer is probably typical. You know, we're seeing a drought. Next year it may be an inundation and excessive amounts of grass and so on. In the longer term, you know, perhaps we are seeing drier summers and people giving up on grass, for example, in their gardens. So in a microcosm, this might be saying that as we see the effects of climate change, there will be significant shifts in the kind of material that gets recycled, both in green bins and later on we might think about what goes in blue bins. And that, again, impinges on bin collection reliability, because if you fill the truck, you have to stop the round, and that ripples through. So the question is, how are we, South Cambs, anticipating some of these changes, building in flexibility into our waste collection systems, and kind of anticipating some of these scenarios?
Thank you very much. Councillor Milnes.
Thank you, Chair. The environment for collecting green waste, including food waste, is under national review. We have conducted a separate food waste trial recently, I think with about 3,000 different users. Alex will be able to confirm the sort of numbers that we've had in the trial. But I think there's something of a watching brief. We would like more separate waste to be collected, separate green waste, and things that we can do in the blue bin context as well. The big thing is to try and avoid waste going in the black bins and going to landfill. And that's our main focus of attention. And I think this is where government legislation, which is very late in arriving, we've been waiting for it for a couple of years now at least, and that will help us determine what we are going to be obliged to do under national regulations. So it's very much a watching brief for the moment. And I don't know if Alex wants to add anything else to that summary of the situation that we have.
Please do, if you can.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to add to that, we are, as a local authority, we're part of a partnership with other local authorities, and that query around how we anticipate what future demand and future service delivery needs to be is very much kind of looking at what we do with those partners and having that strategy around the future demand. As Councillor Milne said, we are awaiting some further guidance from central government and from DEFRA around what will be kind of stipulations of how we collect recycling, but also kind of extra kind of responsibilities and new ways of dealing with kind of waste streams that are coming online. So a lot of that kind of looking forward it is being done at the moment, and obviously awaiting some of that further guidance. So that will be in the strategies that come out shortly.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stobart.
Just briefly, so we're listening to some input there which refers to government guidance, but actually we're South Cambs and we're quite peculiar to ourselves as well. So just one small additional question. How does the local situation bear on that, or produce some variation in that in that national response? How do we vary it to accommodate South Cambs?
Councillor Milne, would you like me to go to Alex first, or do you want to do the answer yourself?
I'm not sure that we have one. Even within the recap area, so the Cambridge and Peter recycle group, there are significant variances because of the type of location we're in. So I know that our officers are very diligent in trying to accommodate what we're doing locally. I don't know what Alex would like to add to that, but I'm confident that we are doing the best that we can, understanding our area. So we're a shared waste service, and clearly, for example, have a very different profile of use in the city than we do in the rural South Cambs area. So that's pertinent. We have to run a service that can accommodate both profile, and they are different. So we're already quite adept at adapting our service.
And Alex Day.
Yeah, just to add, we do collect a lot of data around how we deliver the service as it currently is. So a lot of work does go into reviewing that data and looking for trends and kind of trying to look forward in terms of what our service delivery needs to be, and how that matches up. So we're kind of constantly in this process of looking at how we kind of make that service fit for purpose, and responding to that future demand around particular growth areas and that kind of thing as well. So yes, yeah, we're definitely trying to make sure that we do that.
If I can, Chair, there's a particular example of that we've just discussed recently. My own experience having two teenage children is that they really don't spend very much time thinking about where their waste goes. And I think engagement with certain profiles of users is important in this. And we do actively seek ways of encouraging the whole of our user population to deal with their waste appropriately.
suggesting that your teenage children may not be an entirely representative sample, I feel that we ought to point out as a council that we are not completely suggesting that all young people don't care about recycling. We recognise that young people do value recycling. However, my teacher hat points out that you are no doubt correct for many young people. So I feel I want to add that before we move on. Councillor Stobart, is there anything you wanted to say in response?
Just one thing, Chair. Thanks through you to Alex and Councillor Mills.
Okay, thank you very much. I have Councillor Bradnam, and then I'm assuming it's going to be me, and then we'll move on from what is always our biggest item at the start of the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. It's quite a straightforward question, I hope, and that is that in ES 418, which is on page 16 in the page numbers embedded in the PDF, I just wanted to ask, why did the target change? Because it's gone from a target of around about 50 to a target of slightly more than that, I assume around about 52. And I just wondered what prompted the target to change, and what was the reason for that? Thank you.
Are you referring to ES 418?
Yep, so that's the target which is in the green line. It goes along from January 2021 at 50, and it goes to April 2022, at which point it goes up. And I'm wondering what prompted us to increase our own target.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Milnes, in the first instance?
I think I'm going to defer because I can't remember.
Alex Day? I'm afraid we are not hearing your remembered answer.
Thank you, Chair. So sorry, I might bring in Kevin at this point because I think this is to do with our having a stretch target, and that's why we introduced a higher target.
Excellent. Kevin Ledger.
Hello. Yes, I think that was the case. I recall some discussions with Bodie, the head of service, at the beginning of the financial year, or even just kind of entering into the new financial year, whereby we were looking at previous performance and saw that we had consistently kind of met the 50% target over previous years, and so it was a case of looking to see if there was any possibility of increasing our ambitions in relation to that target. So I think that was kind of some of the context around the discussions that took place around that target.
So that's encouraging to hear, and that's what I guessed must have happened. You realised that you could meet these targets and so change the target. So that's great, and long may it continue. Thank you.
Marvellous, thank you very much. And I have cleared all my list of councillors, so I would just like to I think I'm going to direct my question to you, Councillor John Williams, even though part of it is related to housing, because it's to do with collection of money. So in the first instance, I'll just do that. If I reference to, on the revenue section, FS 102, housing rent collected, and to FS 105, council tax collected year to date, it's quite noticeable that both of these are in the amber. What also strikes me is the fact that both of them are about the ability of residents to pay the bills that we are requiring them to pay. And I was wondering whether or not you had any thoughts about why it is that we are seeing two targets related to residents and their ability to pay turning amber, when in general we retain greens across the board.
Well, because of the economic circumstances, people are finding it more difficult to pay their bills, and that includes council tax and council rents. You know, I think our officers are doing an extremely good job in identifying those, particularly on housing, identifying those who are struggling and in signposting them, ensuring that they can get the support that they need. And similarly with council tax, you know, and in fact we've literally just agreed today at Cabinet a whole list of, a whole suite of schemes that are being introduced to actually help out residents and tenants in these very difficult times. So, you know, it just indicates that what everyone knows anyway, that with inflation and the cost of living increasing, that people are struggling. And South Cambs is no different to the rest of the country.
Great, thank you. And I'm particularly pleased to hear that the answer is not only obviously a reflection of kind of the reality situation, but as you said there, that the council is doing all it can to support residents in that situation and applying funds, and as you said, about conversations at Cabinet in order to do that. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I'm happy for that to be the answer, Councillor John Williams, unless you want one of the officers to add anything to it. I'm quite happy for your answer to be complete, unless there's anything else that you feel, Peter, you need to add.
I mean, all I would probably add is that, particularly on council tax, we are very close to the target, and we do just see fluctuations around it. So perhaps a little bit more concern on the housing rents, because that's further adrift, but I think John's comments sort of cover it pretty much. Thanks.
Great. Thank you for adding that to it. Okay, so thank you, colleagues. So we move on now to Appendix B, the Business Plan Progress Report. And obviously, as colleagues are aware, this is what tends to happen when we're on the kind of data report bit. We tend to take a long time with the first bit, we then go a bit quicker with this second bit, and then our other bits become slightly shorter items by their very nature. I do say that sometimes in hope as well as in reality. But obviously, if things take time, they take time. So, who would like to start us off with anything related to Appendix B, the Business Plan Progress Report? Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm referring now to item A2, Roman italics 2, which is on page 26. Why are we restricting ourselves, so question, why are we restricting ourselves to local schools and employers when in fact elsewhere in the eastern region and further into the Midlands and to the north, there may well be ample opportunities to recruit. So why stick to the local when there may be good people out there just a little further away?
Okay. In my mind, in the first instance, I would direct this towards Councillor Smith, but I'm not sure that her plates can answer. So therefore, Councillor Milnes, as the deputy... Oh, no, Councillor Smith has reappeared. I was hoping, Councillor Smith, that you had disappeared for a few seconds there. Did you hear Councillor Stobart's question, or would you like it repeated?
No, could you repeat the gist of it? Sorry, the dogs were going mad.
No, it's absolutely fine, Councillor Smith, and a long meeting. We are entitled to a few moments. Councillor Stobart, if you could repeat the question for Councillor Smith, please.
Yes, let me just turn it up. We're developing a formal engagement programme with local schools concerning recruitment. So why focus on local when, in fact, there may well be good people within easy reach in the eastern region and further west in the Midlands and to the north? Again, possibilities of more people. Why don't we reach out a little further?
So I think I'm probably going to ask Liz to comment as well. So I mean, we know from all sort of all the work we've done on the 4-day week that living here is a real barrier because it's so expensive here. So if we're targeting people who are already here, actually that rather overcomes, well, possibly overcomes one of those problems. It's very, very challenging to get people to relocate here. And that's one of the reasons for doing the 4-day week scheme, in that it makes us attractive as an employer, hopefully in a way that compensates for the high cost of living here as well. And I think I think it's perfectly proper that we focus on the local initially. Certainly when we look at our procurement work, we give extra weighting to local suppliers, to local people, local businesses, and we are a local authority, and I think our focus should always start with the local. Okay. I don't know if Liz wants to say anything.
Yes, Liz Watts.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Just two things to add. I think the corollary of what Bridget has said is that going further afield would likely mean that anyone that we recruited would need to move to Cambridgeshire, and for those jobs which apprenticeships tend to be on the kind of lower end of the scale, I think that would be, present real challenges. So that's one issue. We do, however, do a lot of work with universities recruiting wider for a number of our posts. So it's not that we're just restricting ourselves to Cambridgeshire, it's just the apprentices where we tend to focus more locally.
Okay. Councillor Stobart?
So I'm just casting my mind back to my early years, and yeah, we had apprentices converge on the big industrial centres. Well, isn't necessarily the same thing, but from all over the country, and it was that in that kind of rich diversity that you got that range of people you needed to support the business in the future. So I was just reflecting on that experience. I appreciate the practical points of living in the Cambridge area, very expensive, but some diversity, anything that pushes towards diversity, I think has good qualities associated with it. But I appreciate the practical points that, through you, Chair, Liz and Councillor Smith have raised.
Okay, thank you. Any other councillors? Sorry, yes, of course, Bridget, please.
If I could just come back and say absolutely, and I mean, I hope you know that introducing as much diversity into our workforce is every bit as important to us as introducing diversity into our council members as well. And that's why we've introduced various policies recently, which makes us hopefully an employer of choice for people with disabilities. We are trying to be as parent friendly as possible, and we've had a recent policy to make sure that women who have premature babies, aren't get all the maternity leave that they're entitled to. It doesn't disadvantage them because their baby's been premature. So I hope we bend over backwards to do that. If there's ever more we can do, then of course we shall do it. I mean, we're also a partner of the Greater Cambridge Partnership, which does, and the Combined Authority, both of which do lots of work on skills, but pretty local skills. But obviously the Combined Authority has just been responsible for the new university at Peterborough, which is very much focusing on probably a more local cohort of students, but very much feeding them into the sort of skills training that we need in our area. But hopefully that will help us in attracting a more diverse workforce, and not also in terms of the sort of backgrounds that people come from. We've also got one of our officers who's promoting apprenticeship opportunities for care leavers, and I personally think that's marvellous.
Marvellous, thank you very much.
Sorry about the barking dogs.
Yes, Councillor Stobart.
Nothing further. Thank you for the answers.
Great, thank you very much. I have Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. And my question is in relation to page 26, B5. I think we have to do with the community centre in Northstowe. Just following the recent announcements and changes to the temporary facilities, just wondering, as that's on amber, so is running slightly behind, which is big projects often do, will we be seeing something at full council with the other options to bring those back? Just conscious that now the temporary facilities also aren't happening as planned, so we don't want to leave them with nothing any longer than we need to.
Councillor Smith, I'm going to have to come to you at this point. I think Councillor Handley, and unfortunately I think Councillor Handley has held on for a long period of time, and unfortunately we've asked the question related to him literally just after he left, which I take responsibility for, obviously, as chair. So, Councillor Smith.
That's fine. So, a considerable amount of mine and Councillor Handley's and officer time is taken up with, trying to move forward the new facilities at Northstowe as fast as we can. And, we're at the point now where really any further delay is unacceptable. We've gone a long way to develop much more positive relationships with the town council there. That work's been going really well. Councillor Handley is now involved in a big sort of community liaison group can't remember the name of it offhand, but again, that's very positive. That's about making sure that what we as a council are delivering in Northstowe very, very much reflects what the residents and the town council are telling us that they want. So, you know, this is a massive project involving massive amounts of money. It is really complicated, but it's, you know, we've made significant progress in the last 18 months, and I think the town council are now appreciating that we are now, I won't say on the cusp, but a darn sight nearer than we were, and it's a major focus for us.
Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. My question was around temporary facilities in the meantime, which hasn't been addressed.
Sorry.
Whether we'll be seeing that at full council.
Councillor Smith.
Right, I'm just trying to think. So obviously, you know, very disappointingly, we haven't been able to progress the purchase of the show home. So we are now looking at an alternative. And again, I'm not sure how much is in the public domain, but as soon as we can come and be more public about what the interim facilities are, then of course we will share that, because it's really important that we share it with the residents and the local members for Northstowe as quickly as we can. I'm only hesitating because I'm not quite sure how much is in the public domain at the moment. My apologies if I'm being overcautious.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Heather Williams, Anne Ainsworth is offering to add something to that answer. Would you like to come? Then that's fine. I'm happy for you to come back in now and go back to Councillor Smith, or do you want me to get Anne Ainsworth to add to the answer and then you come back?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not asking what the temporary facilities are, which I'm being very careful not to ask that question, but there were other options on the table when we took the vote back in March of this year on the temporary facilities. Will those other options, not stating what they were, be coming back to us at full council for assessment in a couple of weeks?
So we will certainly, whether it's a settlement or whether, well, it depends how much money. I think the answer is probably yes, but I'll ask Anne Ainsworth to confirm that. And I think there will be other options over and above the options that we've already seen, because we've been trying to identify, you know, other ways of solving this problem. But if I may defer to Anne, that would be helpful.
Anne Ainsworth.
So you're absolutely right. There were a number of options that were brought forward earlier this year, and at that point the decision was taken to proceed with the show homes. Obviously, given as part of that due diligence process, the decision was then taken that that wasn't the right approach to make. We can bring that back to council for you to look at the option that we're recommending to proceed with.
Councillor Heather Williams.
I'd be very keen to see something, you know, at full council. And last time it did come through scrutiny as well. So if extra scrutiny meetings are needed, because, you know, there were other options and we could start delivering for people in Northstowe a lot sooner if we were, you know, looking at it in this full council coming.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Councillor Ellington, sorry, are you happy for me to move on? Thank you. Councillor Ellington.
Thank you, Chairman. Page 31, C6, talks about upgrading 1800 streetlights with LED. I am aware and very concerned about two of my very small villages who are currently experiencing 900% increase in their electric bill for their streetlights. Because they are so small, the companies don't want them and are really revving up the costs. And I wondered whether it's not just about producing LED and making it cheaper, which I'm grateful for if it happens to my villages, but also for perhaps the council to look at a central electrical contract that smaller villages can plumb into, because there really is a problem.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cohen, I think this might be you, Councillor Milnes, but we feel it might be Councillor John Williams. We apologise if we are unsure.
It's me.
It's you, okay. Thank you. Councillor Milnes.
So the LED programme was really very timely, as you can imagine, because of the huge increase in utility and particularly, obviously, the electricity rates. But street lighting is very typically done on unmetered supplies. So basically, you work out how many street lamps you've got, what the sort of usage would be, and then get charged by the electricity company for that unmetered supply. Unfortunately, and I'm just trying to remember whether it was 2 or 3 years ago, the County Council washed their hands of this process and left all the parishes responsible for their own bills. And it caused a huge amount of disruption. It was an extremely painful process. I sat with 4 other people in an office waiting for a supplier to answer to the phone. And when they did, we got a very unsatisfactory answer. And that was for one of the largest villages in the district. So I've got a lot of sympathy with Councillor Ellington's own parishes that are very much smaller and therefore have even less negotiating power. And unfortunately, I don't have a particular supportive option there for her parishes to approach. It's a very awkward situation, and very disappointing that the County Council chose to choose their method of operation and in fact withdrew their service in this regard.
Mr. Wellington?
Sad, but maybe we should be looking at it under a grant system. John Williams is shaking his head.
Did you want to add something, Councillor John Williams?
Yeah, there's quite a history to this. It goes back several years, and at one time, parish councils, I can remember this when I first got elected back in 2010, parish councils were invited to give up their lights to the Highway Authority, to the County Council, in part of the Balfour BT replacement of the highway lights. Most parishes declined to do that because they didn't want the lights that Balfour BT were putting in. And of course, also we also, a bit unusual for a district council, but we also, because of the West Chesterton Urban District Council, we also own some street lights. And a decision was taken, and this council, again many years ago, not to transfer those street lights to the County Council. So we're in a situation where we have not just County Council supplying street lights, but we have ourselves supplying street lights, we have parish council supplying street lights, and of course we have other, on private roads, we have others supplying street lights, such as housing associations. So the whole thing is a bit of a mess, and we don't have the ability to take that on. I'm sorry, Councillor Ellington. I mean, the people who did were the County Council, who obviously had the staff and the ability to do that. But as Councillor Milne said, about 3 years ago, the County Council decided that it no longer wanted to do that and passed it to the parish councils, where the parish councils have to pay for the electricity. Now, some of that electricity is spent on lighting our lights, but there were also other lights that the parish councils light. So the whole thing is really complicated, and I'm sorry to say that we just don't have the facilities and the resources to take that on.
Councillor Ellington, anything to add?
I don't think there's anything further I can say.
Okay, I don't actually have anyone else down at the moment, but something has come into my mind in relation to this statement, and I'm not entirely sure whether it will be Councillor Milnes or Councillor John Williams to answer. C6 specifically says upgrade our stock of 1,800 streetlights to LED. So does that mean that we are responsible as District Council for those 1,800 lights? Do we own them? I apologise for being a little bit ignorant on it.
Yes, these are the street lights that we own,
right,
and maintain.
Okay.
But the parish councils pay the cost of the electricity to light them. And that decision was taken many, many years ago that the parish councils could do that because they didn't want to transfer those lights, or want us to transfer those lights to Balfour Beatty. So the decision was taken, I think, back in sort of 2014 or something, that the parish councils would take on the cost of running those lights because they also had other lights. And as I think Councillor Milner's explained, none of this is metered. So it's extremely difficult to decide who owns what and what lights are costing the parish council. So the whole thing is extremely complicated. And the most simplest way to overcome this was the decision, and we weren't the administration then, but the decision was taken that the parish council should pay for the electricity, but the lights would remain our lights and we would maintain them. Now we get to a situation where a great many of these lights were sold sodium lights. The columns were in a poor state because a lot of them were cast iron. They needed replacing. So we went ahead and replaced the columns and the lanterns. And the advantage that the parish council has over that is because they're LED, they're cheaper to run. So actually, by us doing this work, it's actually resulted in the parishes having less, lower energy bills for their lights. But there are some villages, for example, Tevisham, who we don't have any lights in Tevisham, but the parish council do. And I assume that it's the same in Sue's villages. They're not our lights, they're the village lights. But of course, it's down to the parish council they own them and maintain them. It's down to the parish council to replace them.
And I think sorry, I'll come to you second, Councillor Leons. I think, Councillor Ellington, when you were referring to this in the conversation last night, you were referring to maybe an example of a very, very small village that might only have 6 lights, and therefore, by definition, its parish precept is going to be equally small. So that becomes a problem. Okay, I feel much clearer on that in terms of, as you've said there, Councillor John Williams, even if it is our lights, we are fitting all the bills as a district council to replace them, to put them up and maintain them, and it's just the electricity bills, unless it happens to be that a village has unfortunately ended up in a situation where all those lights are for the parish. Yes, okay. Whilst that is not a particularly helpful answer, I feel I understand better. Councillor Heather Williams, you have something to add on that? I think we're then probably moving on.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify something through the lights discussion. And I think one thing we have always all agreed on, that if anyone was putting street lights in, they would not have the system that we have in place of all the different ownerships. It's something that has evolved over many, many years. But on page 31, C6, it says about reducing and saving parish councils money, which I would expect we're putting in LEDs. But we've also been told that they're not metered. So is it something that that they tell them and that they're LED and therefore it's a different flat fee? If they're not metered, and even though they are using less energy, how are the parish councils or ourselves, getting that money? And I've always, Chair, if it helps, thought of street lights like a freehold is ours and the leasehold is the parish's. But I think what Councillor Ellington was saying was about setting up perhaps facility, and Councillor Milnes referred to about bargaining power, and the smaller ones don't have the bargaining power. Is there something we could do to help parishes come together, to negotiate together, as opposed to having these small ones? I myself have got more parish meetings than many, and some of them don't even have a precept. But what we're looking at here was not the district council, I think, from what I've understood, fitting the bill, but actually helping to get creative or collective bargaining power Is that something that we could maybe assist with, which wouldn't be us actually paying for anything? So two things there, Chair.
Councillor John Williams in the first instance.
Thank you. But that would still require officer time. I mean, the reason why the county gave up doing exactly what you wanted is because it was costing them a lot of money to coordinate and organise and negotiate with the various electricity organisations. So it passed that responsibility down to the parishes, and we don't have the ability to pick that up. We don't have the officers with the expertise, and we would have to employ more officers to do, or at least an officer to do that. And you know, it's a difficult situation. I mean, it may be that the parish is having problems with this. It could approach the county and ask the county to take its lights over. But you know. But at the moment, we certainly don't want to take on that responsibility that the county had because of the cost of doing it. It's just not, and also it's not a district council responsibility. As I'm saying, you know, for historic reasons, South Cambs, most district councils don't have streetlights, and it's only because for historic reasons that we've got these streetlights. And I think we've done as much as we can to reduce the burden by installing LED and making sure that they're most modern and energy efficient. And I think that's probably as far as we can go with this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Heather Williams, and then I'll come to Councillor Stobart for the next question.
Thank you, Chair. There was just a question around if they're not metered, how is the cost savings filtering through of the energy efficiencies that we're making?
I can answer that for you.
Thank you, Councillor Mills.
Yeah, so the unmetered supply requires you to inform the electricity company so they can reassess if you change the types of light or lamp units to, in our case, to LED from sodium or similar older fashioned lights. And they will work out a rate for such devices. And I think it's really a very substantial reduction in the cost. So it's about 40% less than their previous lights, I think was the last estimate I saw. So that at least will give them some advantage. But of course, in the current circumstances, we've got you know, vastly increased electricity rates. So there's not going to be any net gain for them. It's just going to be less of a painful gain.
Thank you. Councillor Heather Williams, you happy for me to move on? And Councillor Stobart, who will be the final question on this item.
On this item of the agenda?
Sorry, as in
it's
this.
Not relevant to street lighting?
No.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm looking at items C3, italic 1, 2 and 3. And that's on page 30 of the agenda or 36 of the PDF. So significant improvements through use of renewable energy, better energy management around this building. So my question concerns, so first of all, how do we propagate that good practice? Because I'm assuming that the council is pioneering to some extent. I mean, these things are being done, you know, in many places, but for a building of this type in this place, there will be some excellent data generated. How does that become, in a sense, good practice, which is communicable to local businesses? And secondly, is there a route for that data, that monitoring, to be used in the longer term to actually keep that very progressive image of the energy management in and around this building? So, yeah, those two questions. Benefit to local business. How do we keep ourselves at the leading edge?
Okay. Councillor Milnes in the first instance.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we had a conversation earlier today that covered this topic, because as you say, we're doing really quite interesting things, both in South Cambs Hall, although it's taken an awful lot longer than we would have preferred. And we'd have preferred them to have stuck to their schedule. But we've also got the Renewable Energy Network project at Water Beach, which will again give us a good case history for us to glean really very useful information and gain experience about working with UK power networks, for example, where negotiating with them for connection to the grid is an important part of that process. And I think we can certainly use that experience to our own gain. What I hadn't really thought about, which Councillor Hobart just suggested, was that this may be very useful information for other commercial organisations locally in the district to be able to pass on to them.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mills, is there any officer you'd like to turn to add anything to that? I'll take that as a no. Okay, Councillor Stobart.
No, that's excellent. I could go deeper into a technical question about how we're gathering that data and organising it, but I think that's a good answer, and I think you know, we can pursue the other details later on.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So I think that brings us to the end of questions in relation to that, which brings us then on to agenda item 7, which is General Fund Revenue Bids and Savings. Following our pre-meeting last night, we'd like to ask a first question, and this is not a question designed to reject the fact that the report is here. Sorry, yes, Councillor Heather Williams. Oh, right, okay. I was getting in early. So, as I say, this is not a question designed to reject the fact the report was here, but in order, I think, for us to fully understand and ask questions in the way we wanted to, we just wondered, either from yourself, Councillor John Williams, or if you want to hand over to Peter Maddock, what exactly your thoughts were in terms of what you hoped to get out of presenting this report to the Scrutiny and Overview Committee. I don't mind who answers. And it's not designed to be a rejection of the report, it's just a thought process question.
Yeah, so this is a draft report at this stage that's due to go to Cabinet on the 12th of December.
Mm-hmm.
The budget process has been ongoing for some time, and as part of that process, we asked for bids for additional funding for particular projects or savings. Now, there's a list here of the savings and the bids that potentially are going to be brought forward. There's a note saying there that there is some information still awaited before we can finalise whether the bid should go forward or shouldn't go forward. I think the committee is asked to consider the items in the tables and comment as appropriate, whether you think the bids are concerned, you're happy with them, whether you've got any questions. There are officers from other service areas who can answer questions on bids in relation to their particular area. The other bit of context I think it might be useful to give is this bid process has to be viewed in the context of the general financial state that local authorities find themselves in. I think it's fair to say local authorities collectively are holding their breath for Thursday when we have the budget, because we are expecting to see some cuts to funding. Obviously at this stage we don't know what those will be, but we are predicting at this stage a budget gap for next year of somewhere between 700,000 and £1 million. And a lot of that has been driven by the turmoil that we've seen in relation to interest rates. So we have seen interest rates rise significantly in recent months, and predictions of interest rate rises even further beyond what we're seeing at the moment. I think it's probably fair to say that some of the predictions we've seen have suggested interest rates going to as high as 5, 6 or maybe even 7%. More recent information is suggesting it's not going to be as bad as that, but I think the overall picture is that we don't really know where interest rates are going. And some of the increase in interest rates will hit the budget in 23-24, which 2, 3, 4 months ago we weren't expecting. So this is something that's come through fairly recent. So also I would say that you know, the bids that have come forward have been closely scrutinised by officers, and where it's believed that those bids couldn't be supported or they weren't absolutely necessary, they have been removed. So the bids that you're left with are those that we believe are ones that should be brought forward. As I say, there are some highlighted in pink where we still we still require additional information to be certain whether we really need to put them in, or is there some option to them. And a lot of those are around ICT projects. So this is a bit of a sort of position statement, if you like, rather than the finished article. So it's just really whether there's any comments from the committee about any particular items or anything generally about the bids and savings process.
Thank you. That's most definitely the comprehensive answer that we were discussing last night and thinking that might be the case, but we wanted to absolutely make sure. And in particular, where you've referenced there the fact that the list that remains is after it's been filtered, which we assumed and we thought was the case, but we just wanted to absolutely make sure that was the case. So appreciate that. I have Councillor Heather Williams for the first question or comment.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, on page 40, like you say, that's quite a big budget gap for this year, but equally on paragraph 8, you know, it's budget gap overall of 7.5 million, and there's going to be so many different variables over the coming time, so it does make sense that we're going to have to be very careful as to how taxpayers' money is spent. Chair, when it comes, so I'm guessing we're going to be noting this.
Unless there's anything particularly specific that anyone wishes to flag up or ask about.
Yeah, I just think in being asked to comment on this is really difficult when we're not seeing what's being discounted. Because I was trying to, look at it from a household bill, okay? The oven's broke, we'll spend £100 on an oven. I know you're thinking, wish could get an oven for £100. That seems logical, sensible, but if the £100 means you haven't got the food for that week, then you're going to go, no, oven has to wait, you need to spend it on the food. So it's really difficult, I believe, to judge this without seeing what has been discounted and if we're being asked to comment. So I don't feel I have enough information here to make an informed comment. Because on the surface, things can seem very reasonable and what have you, but actually, what is this in the place of? So if this report does come to us again in future, I think we need to be seeing what's not going forward as well as what is proposed to go forward. And I think without that information, I just can't make a comment, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stobart. Did you want any kind of answer to that?
I think it's more statement-based, a request for future reports of this nature, and a nice little sheet that tells us what we're meant to do.
Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. So page 45 of the agenda, which I think is probably 51 of the PDF, there's a 1-year extension of a post. So it's a project officer post. And I think through Councillor Williams' question, what's the, if you will, the environment of this question? It is fund it or not. And fund it or not would be, if we don't fund it, then actually this very important area of activity stalls because there isn't somebody to do this important work around, for example, EV programme delivery. But that was just a comment. The post itself looks intriguing, so it'd be really helpful to know from the management responsible what's hoped for from this 1-year extension. The kind of, I guess there's a person in post already. What's going to happen here if this is funded?
So, which line on page 45 is that on?
It's third line. So.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Sorry, I was looking at the bottom of the page and therefore I was looking in the wrong place. So I assume then that this comes to you, Councillor Milnes, in the first instance?
I'm not sure it does, but could Councillor Stobart repeat the essence of his question? I lost track of that.
Sorry, I rambled. So Chair, just to refine the question, this is what is the aim of this appointment in a brief summary.
Councillor Mills, do you need us to highlight which appointment we're referring to in the table?
Yes, I'm sorry.
No, that's absolutely that's absolutely fine. I noticed as I referred to you, and you are probably going to pass it on to Alex, possibly anyway. But obviously, we'll go through you in the first instance. So, on page 45 of the report, which is page 51 of the PDF, the third line in the table says Director at CW, Climate Environment, and refers to a year's extension of the post of the Project Officer related to extension of Climate and Environment Project Officer for Energy and EV Programme Delivery.
Yes, so we're extending that, and actually Alex will be more familiar with the detail of that. So I'll save us all a bit of time and direct the question to her, if that's all right.
Of course, thank you, Alex.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. So we have a number of projects that particular post works on, including the new EV charge point grant scheme that we just set up this year and extends into next year as well. We also anticipate more funding coming out from other sources that we can lever in for additional EV projects as well. And there's also a lot of activity that we're involved with local partners as well. So that's why we envisage that area of work kind of growing and ongoing, which is why we've requested an extension to that post.
Okay, Councillor Stobart.
Just one brief question to finish. If it's extended for a year, does that enhance the prospect of this becoming a permanent post?
Well, so perhaps we'll look at next year's bid process to answer that question. But it's likely, isn't it? You know, we have this policy of agreeing to the core council, and we want to extend that as much as possible. We want to extend our use of renewables as much as possible, you know, and we'll continue that work. And that will likely have a concomitant staffing requirement to go with it.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Smith online, followed by... No, she's waving to say no. I have Councillor Cone for a next question. First of all, I should go to Councillor Stobart. Are you happy for us to move on?
I am.
Okay. And then it'll be Councillor Cone, but Councillor John Williams, if you wanted to Yes, please do, yes. Oh, at the end of the item. Yeah, sorry, absolutely. Councillor Cone.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick question regarding the 7.5 million sort of gap, essentially. It says in paragraph 8 of the...
Sorry, Chair. It's very difficult to hear Councillor Cone. In fact, everybody could speak a little bit closer to their microphones. That would probably be helpful.
My apologies, Councillor Mills. Is that a bit better?
Thank you. Yeah, that's much better. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so I was referring to page 40 and paragraph 8. My question was, do we have any idea of how much the transformation programme will give us in terms of funding towards that gap within that time frame that they've stated in paragraph 8?
Either Councillor John Williams or Peter Maddox.
So the transformation programme is expected to deliver £2 million worth of savings, and the 7.5 million is after that has been taken into account. So it would have been 9.5 million potentially. So, and that gap primarily arises because of the expected fair funding review in 25-26.
Okay, great. Just before I come to Councillor John Williams, Councillor John Williams, I just wanted to say I'd noted that the second line on page 43 of the report in Appendix A obviously means that, which is referring to the increase in fuel costs, means that to some extent there are items within this bidding process which actually are effectively beyond the control of the council anyway. So although initially I think when you see something that says revenue bids ongoing, you kind of think, well, this is going to be things that, you know, are nice to be able to do or will make things better. It does strike me that it reflects also just the increased costs that exist. And then I really kind of what struck me with that was then the third line regarding the HVO fuel bid, that obviously as well as having to pay more for diesel, Obviously, the council, I assume, what I should read into that is continuing to seek ways of saving money in the long run in terms of the way in which fuel can be provided, whilst also delivering on the green agenda as well. So I think it was quite an interesting document in both showing what was important but also reflecting reality. So, Councillor John Williams, do you want to sum up?
Yeah, I just wanted to, briefly going back to Peter's point, I mean, it does include a fair funding review, or the expectation of a fair funding review, and that review causes us to lose a considerable amount of income from business rates. Clearly, if that, and so far it's never happened actually, but if it doesn't happen, then clearly that will have a big impact on the end, on the outturn figure of 7.5 million, because we will, hopefully, if we retain our income from business rates, then it's going to reduce that. But also, the government, we've also put into the fact that we estimate that we expect that we're going to lose the house bonus, the new homes bonus. Thank you. Yes, as well, which is again is a considerable amount of money. Now, going back and putting this into context, we don't put the budget together in isolation for the MTFS. This is here, and so is the MTFS, to deliver the business plan. So, that's what, I would suggest you look at, and then come back and look at the budget and look at the MTFS and say, right, have they got this right in order to deliver that business plan? Because, there's nothing in this, there isn't anything that we would like to have in this budget at all. In this budget is there to get us through this financial crisis, to deliver that business plan. So if there's anything in that business plan you do not agree with, or you think we could do it differently, then this is where you come forward with suggestions on how we can change the budget to the way that you would like to see the business plan.
Thank you.
Okay, so there is a link between the budget and the business plan. So we're not just looking at figures in isolation here and asking people to come forward with bids and savings based on the end result of the budget, on the outturn. We're actually saying to people, look, this is what we believe we need to spend or save to deliver our business plan. Okay, so start at the business plan and then work back. That's what I'm saying.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the item, and as Councillor Heather Williams said, we are noting that has been given to us. There's no further comment to make. So we then move on to item 8 on the agenda, which is the first example of an item on the agenda which is a result of the Scrutiny Overview Committee wishing to have a report and to investigate something. And this is related to the future use of South Cambridgeshire Hall, which came up in a conversation we had a few meetings ago, and we now have the report here. So, we've all seen the report. Obviously, in the first instance, any questions we ask will be going to Councillor Milnes, and then possibly on to Jeff Membry. So, any questions, colleagues, in relation to our report here regarding the future use of South Cambridgeshire Hall? Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. So 2 main ones, looking at the proposed, so South Council would have the central floor, just around how we would sort of safeguard and create, redo our security, because essentially we'd have, if we're renting this out, we won't know everybody that's coming through, because even if we know the companies, we won't know their clients, etc. And we have a responsibility to make sure that there's confidential information in the council and all those sorts of things. The council facilities that taxpayers are paying for aren't being used by other companies. So I feel that that's something that we definitely need to understand and know, because what's lovely about this building is it's so open. And so you don't feel sort of closed in or anything else. It's lots of open workspace, which I believe was purposeful when it was done. So that's my first point, is around security arrangements. The other was who we will be, that I feel we need, is who we will actually be allowing to rent this space from us. And I say that because those policies will be vital as to whether this is successful or not, in my view. because we must not, we must be very open and accessible to everybody. That's really important. But equally, there will be tensions around what this council building and who we're renting and who we are receiving money from. So, for example, companies would potentially have links to Russian and be Russian funding. We wouldn't want that. We wouldn't want something that was inappropriate. But then you have other issues as well, you know, tax avoidance companies. Would that sit right with us, given the fact we're reliant on tax to fund services? So I feel that that's another piece of information that before it progresses, actually we need to know, because there's no point putting all these plans together if we don't actually have a vision of who will be able to use this. For example, you know, there are examples, Chair, without trying to, you know, we're not, this is before the watershed, as they say. There are certain companies that we definitely would not want advertising themselves as being at this building, but how do we ensure that we are therefore still being open and not discriminating equally? It's a tension that we're going to have to find, and I think before we go any further, those barriers need to be decided, and we need to have a clear vision as to who will be allowed access to this building. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Milnes in the first instance.
Yeah, so interesting point. So two aspects of security really that Councillor Heather Williams was referring to, both the physical security aspect in an open space building with the atrium, and then a security aspect of policy of who we might be prepared to rent space to in the space that we have. And I think we've probably got something of a model with the investment board and their requirements on who we are prepared to let buildings to. So I think that's certainly a basis for going forward to create a policy of who we will accept. Because I think Heather Williams is right, is that there are clearly companies out there that we wouldn't want to be associated with. And I'm sure Jeff can add to that as the lead officer in this project. I don't know if you'd like to add to that, Jeff.
Yes, certainly, Councillor. Through you, Chair. Yeah, there's security needs to be designed in at two levels. First of all, there's the way that we arrange our floor space. Currently, for example, we already have tenants within the building. We've got both the NHS and trading standards that work with us, and those confidentiality issues had to be addressed in the way that the floor space and the deskings have been arranged. So certainly that would be that's something that would be built into the detailed floor plan arrangements. The proposal, first of all, is to develop the first floor, which will be where most of our staff will be based, and then at that stage to look at whether that's delivering what we want it to deliver successfully, and then to move on to look at the proposals for the second and the ground floor. I think we would be perfectly happy to bring back to this committee a policy on proposed rental to tenants, so that this committee could agree it before we proceed with anything for the second or ground floor. I think the most important thing, first of all, is to get the first floor sorted out and ensure that that actually meets our needs in terms of having the desk space available for officers. I'm very conscious of the fact at the moment that although we've got a working assumption on the level of occupancy, that's based upon a situation where we've had the greening of South Cambs Hall going on for some time, which means that probably the number of people coming into the offices will be has been less than it might be when that greening project's finished. So what I think we'd like to do is get the first floor sorted out, be confident that it's meeting the needs of our people, and then go on to look at the second and ground floor. What we wanted to do here is give you some idea of the thinking behind the proposals at the moment, but I'm happy to bring more detailed proposals for the second floor back to this committee when we've reached that stage, Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the response that's been given, and particularly about having more people in the building, because I do strongly believe, particularly for our contact centre, that we should have somebody from each department available on hand for if people do come into the building, which we don't always have at the moment. So I think that'd be important for us to actually give flexibility, but have more people in the office. The only thing I would say is in relation to security situations is that it may, if we don't have a way of creating physical barriers into the council areas, then potentially would it not be better for us to be on the highest floor, on the second floor, as opposed to the first floor? So essentially you're sort of sectioning off, so there's no need for anybody that's not related to the council to go to that area, because currently people that are renting the second floor are coming through the council's first floor before they're getting there. So that's what I was saying about understanding the way that we will make sure we're secure and keeping information secure at the same when we're putting these proposals together, if that could be taken on board. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Councillor Heather Williams. And Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. Some of my concerns are similar to those expressed by Councillor Heather Williams. So my concern is, where will our contact centre staff be, and will they have access to officers as well, should they need to? Again, why are we allowing non-South Cambs District Council staff onto the second floor, which means they will go past our staff on the first floor? What's the thinking behind us being on the first floor and our tenants being on the second floor? And that might just be to do with the way it's currently being used and an extension of that. The other thing that concerned me is, I'm glad to see there's still somewhere for members on the first floor. The members' lounge is being maintained, and I'm glad to see that, because I think there are times when members might want to actually work here rather than at home. So I just want to understand the reasoning behind the rented space being on the second floor. If Mr. Membry could respond, that would be really helpful.
Thank you, Jeff. Councillor Mills, I'm going to go to Jeff Membry straight away. Yeah, okay, Jeff.
Well, I was just, the only thing I was going to comment on was that it's an extension of what we're operating right now. And Jeff can confirm that. And he's already mentioned, for example, the NHS staff who work currently on the second floor. So we've got that situation at the moment. And I'm happy for Jeff to add to that.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and through you. Yeah, both the NHS and the oh my goodness, trading standards have currently got contracts for the last for a remaining year. So, in order to make the changes that we need to make, we need to do that either on the first or the ground floor, because we've already rented out the space on the second floor. So that makes it contractually more deliverable. But as you've mentioned, Councillor Bradnam, on the first floor we've not only got desks that officers sit at, but we've got a room for members, we've got access to the council chamber. So that seems to be the most sensible place to house our people. And certainly we'd be moving to a different arrangement whereby a lot of the old paper that's been around in the offices will be gone when we need to move to the new desking arrangements. It's not going to be a case that people coming through the building will be able to come across locked cabinets with big piles of paper in them. Pretty much everything that we deal with is dealt with electronically now, so that once we've digitalized that paper that is still there, the security will be based around people having laptops which only they have access to, and making sure that they keep them secure. So the security challenges are not quite the same that they have been in the past. But certainly when it comes to the contact centre, those people that see people face to face will still need to be in the offices, and they already have access to services, officers from other services, either face to face if they happen to be in the office, or more frequently nowadays through Teams. So if they need advice from a member of the back office, they have that access there already. The other big point is, I think we were discussing earlier on the budget gap that potentially is going to be a challenge for us going forward. The renting out of the top floor gives us the most optimal potential use of space, and potentially that could generate something in the region of £300,000 a year extra income, which will again make a significant contribution to closing that budget gap. So there's a number of things that we have to take into consideration, but certainly, the whole point of bringing this report here is to hear members' concerns and to adapt what we're proposing in light of them, and we'll certainly do that.
Pregnant.
Thank you. And I know it's early days yet, and this is a project that's developing, but have you any feel for how the building will end up being divided up in order to prevent people either using the ground floor rentable space? I mean, I can see that I can see how that works as a separate location. But for people who've got to go up using the same lifts that's still open on the first floor to get to the second floor, how will we, I can see Councillor Milnes is shaking his head. I'm just trying to work out how we will identify the people that are going to the second floor, and will we try to restrict their access to the areas on the first floor? How will that work?
Councillor Milnes or Jeff Membry?
I'm happy for Jeff to take that, but for example, with the access at the moment, public access is available, for example, to the council chamber, but not onto the second floor. You have to have access via there. So that can be part of that solution. And I'm sure Jeff's got this all in hand.
I mean, there is the ability to restrict access based around the access cards that we all carry. I think one of the things I'm trying to perhaps explain is there's not going to be on the first floor that many vulnerable places. So somebody who works on the second floor, if they were to accidentally get off and walk through the first floor, they're not going to have documents laying out on desks that relate to our residents. They're not going to be encountering confidential information. Everything that is going to be digitalized so that our staff will be viewing it on laptops. If they have somebody that's not a member of our staff walking around looking over their shoulder, they would be very confident, I think, in asking them what they were doing and directing them up to the second floor. That's not to say that's what we're relying on, but I think what we're trying to do is ensure that we're not in a position where we have vulnerable information just laying around.
It's not just to do with vulnerable information, it's to do with vulnerable staff as well.
Oh, right. So you're concerned about the security of our staff potentially being attacked by employees of other organisations?
Yes.
I must admit I'd not given that specific thought, Councillor Bradnam. I'll have to come back with a.
Mr. Membry, because we have had to exclude some members of the public from some parts of our council operation, and so I'm just wondering how that would be achieved. That's simply it. Thank you.
I'll perhaps have to come back at another time with an answer to that, Chair, if that's okay.
Absolutely fine. Councillor Batten, are you happy for me to move on? Thank you, Councillor Batten. I have Councillor Cohn.
Thank you, Chair. I think my question has been partially already answered by Jeff Membry. My question was around how the existing NHS and trading standards would be affected during the transition of the building, essentially. But you sort of said about the contract being for X amount of period. Do you envisage that sort of continuing to rent the space, essentially, whilst that transition happens? And following on from that, I wondered if it would be possible to, look at maybe either very small entities using us renting space to smaller groups or entities during that transition period, or is that something that wouldn't really be possible because of the reshuffling of desks and so forth?
Jeff,
yes, to answer your question, Councillor, we are intending, and in fact we have a contract for trading standards and the NHS to continue to rent the second floor during the transition. And certainly I think it would be a good idea to look whether during that transition period there are small businesses that would be interested in renting a smaller aspect of the space. The nature of renting out office accommodation means that actually the best return on profit is if you get somebody who's prepared to rent out an entire floor. But we know that at least for a period, that's unlikely to be the case. So certainly that's something we will seriously look at.
Great, thank you, Councillor Cohn. You happy for me to move on?
Thank you very much.
Okay, I have Councillor Heather Williams and then Councillor John Lovelock.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly in relation to Councillor Bradnam's point about vulnerable members of staff and members, I think what is really important is whatever it's done is that people feel safe in this building. And I would refer to the gentleman that arrived with a box of bugs at the council not that long ago on a full council day. Fortunately, he was not able to get past reception before he released said box of bugs. Which, to be fair, he could have released anything. We were probably quite lucky it was just bugs in there. So if you're having businesses on the second floor, it's not just, I really want to get this point, it's not just the people that you're allowed to go on there. We know with the NHS and trading standards that they're not bringing people in. But if I was in my own business renting a space, I'd want clients to visit, prospective clients. That would be what I'd be using it for. So how do you stop somebody that wants to, explode a box of bugs on us, that just books an appointment with somebody on the second floor and therefore gains access to, and it was bad enough for the poor members in the contact centre in that situation. So I just would like to hear some confirmation about the duty of care, obviously, that we have to officers and members to safeguard them from those situations, because we can't pretend that these things don't happen, because unfortunately they do. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Milnes first, or Jeff Membry?
Yeah, I should be mindful of the fact that we do carry a risk in being a building open to our residents. That's part of the service we offer. So we can't make this building into some sort of fortress that can cope with every contingency and everyone slightly crazed enough to throw cockroaches around the place, or worse. And there are worse scenarios. So I think a security audit of our proposal would be a very useful idea. And I think Jeff can take that on board and incorporate that into our planning.
Thank you. Jeff, anything to add, or are you happy for us to move on?
No, I mean, I'm very happy to include a security audit.
Okay. Councillor Heather Williams, anything to come back on or move on? Move on, thank you. I have Councillor John Lovelock.
Hello, thank you, Chair. I don't want to make too much of it because I think Jeff has just agreed to do a security audit, but I found some of the comments, maybe naive is a little bit pejorative, but the idea that we don't have conversations that you don't want people to hear, the idea that there are no papers, I think we really do need to look carefully and consider it very carefully as segregation of areas. And equally, somebody, for example, if it was me renting some of those spaces, I wouldn't be so happy about people who weren't part of my company wandering through. I think you do need to take carefully into account the confidentiality, many aspects of confidentiality, both of the council and the potential tenants. But a security audit is the right answer, and possibly investment in security barriers where we don't have them now.
Okay, great, thank you. I assume, Councillor Lovelock, you're not particularly looking for an answer, that's just more of a statement, yeah? Okay, and if I can just round off on this and just say to Councillor Milnes, Councillor Milnes, I assume we will not be the only council who let out part of our building in the whole country to others, and therefore I would assume that this is something that happens in other places and that models do exist to deal with these issues in council buildings across the country, and that we will obviously be liaising with other councils to make sure we learn from them who have already gone through this.
We've got a knowledge base within the LGA, for example, that would usefully inform that. So I think that's a perfectly reasonable place for Jeff to look for advice and shared experience. And I think, you know, shared space in general, in commercial terms, is not unusual. You know, if we look at some of the office rental companies that are out there, you know, this is standard procedure for them on either a day-by-day, week-by-week, month-by-month, or yearly basis. So, you know, it's certainly an area where there's plenty of experience that we can call on to make sure that we do things in an effective and safe way.
Okay, thank you. So thank you to Councillor Milnes and to Jeff Membry for your response in relation to. So that was our first item where we had flagged up that. And I feel that's a really important item for us to be involved in. And I think obviously colleagues sat to my right, as it just happens, have raised a number of kind of concerns in relation to safety that I think it's really important that we take on board. But obviously at the same time, as Jeff Membry referred to, we have talked about funding gaps, so therefore that pulls that in back together as well. But I look forward to this coming back to us again at some point in the near future, whether that be December, whether that be January, because there are clearly things that we need to consider. But I think that's a very valuable discussion for us to have. So thank you very much for your report in that regard. Which brings us on to item, I've lost my little bit, agenda item number 9 on the agenda, which is the Young People Task and Finish Group Terms of Reference. Now, yes, of course, Councillor Bradnam.
We have been going for 2 hours. Would it be pertinent to seek just a pause?
If you would like to seek a pause, we're only a couple of items on the end. I was hoping to gallop on through to the end, but I am happy for us to seek a pause. That's absolutely fine. Yes, there is definitely seconded. So if we could ask, I suggest a 5 minutes pause. We will start again at 19:47 by the clock on the wall. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You're now live again.
Thank you very much. And this brings us to agenda item number 9, which is the Young People Task and Finish Group Terms of Reference. There's an oddity to this, which is obviously the 5 members of the Young People Task and Finish Group are all members of this committee. So therefore, we are just checking that we are happy and content with the terms of reference. Just so everyone is aware, Councillor Richard Stobart has taken on the role of chair of the Young People Task and Finish Group. So what I was going to do in this regard is just to ask if there are any members of the committee who wish to make any comment or ask any questions in relation to the terms of reference that have been put forward. I have Councillor Ellington and Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. The only thing that I would like to be sure is that there is some time frame for this work to be completed. Task and finish groups can go on ad nauseum if they don't actually feel that they've come to the end of the piece of work that they've been set up to do. And I would like to see a time frame put in it.
Councillor Stobart, as chair of the Task and Finish Group, I'm going to defer to you for this one.
So last meeting we had a long discussion about the timeline, and what we would like to do is aim to complete a report for council at the July council meeting, which is, I think, second week, is just ahead of the summer holidays. And that made us consider that the interview programme, discussion programme, call it what you will, but the meeting with young people and the discussion would take place between January and March. This is a good time after Christmas, before Easter. Not that much happens, not many people are going away and so on. Educational institutions are in term, at least for a substantial part of that period. So we think anchoring the process in that first 3 months of the year will help us considerably towards meeting a reasonable goal. Now, it could happen that we get to the run-up to the council meeting and there is some issue. We need to rethink or rework the data in some way, but we think this concentrated 3-month period is actually going to anchor us quite well, but we can't legislate for everything that could happen.
Thank you. Councillor Ellington, is that okay? That's fine. Thank you very much. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. So looking at terms of reference, just to confirm that although press and public are not allowed, it has been the case, particularly at task and finish groups and some on constitution things, that other members are allowed to attend and observe if they so wish, as we have with other meetings, and then can only contribute at the discretion of the chair. Just wondering if that's possible, because although I think, 5, you don't want to go beyond 5 for a task and finish group. Sorry, Chair. But there may be others that want to bring suggestions and things. So just making sure that it's going to be open to all of the membership is important. And a bit of a plea, though, that the young people is not just those of school age, and also not just those that are in schools in South Cambs. What we've done previously, which is well-meaning, is we'll consult the sixth form colleges or what have you, but we have a huge border. So a lot of children in my ward, for example, go to school in Bedfordshire or Hertfordshire. They are as equally part of South Cambs as everybody else, but they go to school in Royston because it's, it is the nearest school. So if some thought, and then indeed I have people in my ward who are homeschooled, and also people at university, and I think we can afford to be quite generous. I sort of joked, I know since the last elections we've got a few more councillors that are younger, thankfully, but I sort of joked that Councillor Cone and Councillor Batchelor, Henry Batchelor and I can't stay the young ones forever, as much as we may like. There's a significant gap, I won't reveal my age, but a significant gap between myself and school, and so don't be stingy on what you refer to as young people, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Councillor Stobart.
Through Chair, the response to the first point, I think being generous, I completely agree. We do have a question of limited number of people, limited time, so we do have to choose our targets well, but your point is well made. And I think we're going to see some interesting geographical effects in the sense that we will be talking to, for example, university students in Cambridge, but who've come from all over the country. We'll be talking, I hope, to students at Cambridge Regional College, again, students being drawn from all around the county, probably from over county borders as well. And to your point, if there are students heading over the border from South Cambs into other administrations, then we need to take that into account as well, because all those factors will be brought to bear on how they feel about their environments in South Cambs. So they're good thoughts. You're going to have to let us take those away and have a think through what the programme is going to be like. In the first bit, yeah.
Chair, if I can, and the first bit about it being, the meetings being open for members to be able to contribute, even though they're not public meetings. And the other thing was, please, those that don't go to school at all, Chair, they, you know, there are many people that don't for numerous, or leave school early at 16, you know, or going to trade and are working. They need to be equally as valued as those people that pursue academic careers as well.
Yes, agreed. So can I just comment? And I didn't respond to the first point. Can other members attend? Absolutely. I don't see there's any reason why not. We do need to have a think about meeting dynamics, but I think the point is well made. And as for homeschooling, children in care, all those who might be more difficult to access, we've got to think that through. So officers are being very helpful in that regard in helping us to understand where we might find those, if you were, difficult to access young people. So, you know, we might need to test that list out and just make sure that we've got good coverage. We can't be exhaustive, we don't have the time. But on the other hand, we do need to be representative and we can evaluate that. So thank you, Councillor Williams, for those questions.
Have to move on. Thank you, Councillor Williams. And Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate this is the first investigation of how you'll engage with young people, and that's really, you're feeling your way, and that's fine. I just wanted to point out, I chair the corporate parenting subcommittee at the County Council, and we engage with our children in care through the Children in Care Council, and they have their own meetings and discuss items of concern to them and some items that we ask them that they might like to consider, and then their views are gathered by a number of representatives from the council, and we have just recently started to be able to actually have the young people attending our subcommittee meetings so that they can say to us directly what they think about the papers. But that requires that the papers written for the subcommittee have to be accessible to those young people as well. So wondrously, there is on every paper, there is a 1-paragraph summary in straightforward language about what it's about. So you might want to instigate that, which is really useful, but also that Children in Care Council might be your way into the Children in Care aspect, so we can liaise on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stobart.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Councillor Bradnam for those comments, particularly the offer of help. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Unless there are any other comments in relation to the terms of reference, if I can just ask for agreement by affirmation with the terms of reference for the task and finish group. Great, thank you very much, everyone. Which brings us to agenda item 10, which is the ice rink update. So we're aware of this. Approximately 2 years ago, it was agreed that an ice rink update would come back to the Scrutiny and Overview Committee, and this is that paper. Obviously, quite a lot has happened in the last 2 years in our world, but at the same time, so as things happen to the ice rink update. I just wanted to ask if anybody has any questions or comments in relation to this item.
Is Mr. Maddock going to present it to us, or is it just as it is?
We have agreed that the standard process for the committee is that we do not ask people to present things to us. We have the papers in advance unless the person specifically asked to present. So and then obviously people have the paper in advance and they're able to ask questions if they wish to do so. So is there any questions that anyone wishes to ask? I have Councillor Leaming in the first instance.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask a question about paragraph 17, please, which is the revised loan agreement should see the council recoup its money by 2049. I was wondering under what kind of terms that loan was structured and whether it was linked to inflation.
So, Councillor John Williams, or do you wish me to ask Peter Maddock in the first instance? To Peter, yes, Peter.
Through you, Chair. So there is a link to inflation. The original loan agreement was due to be repaid in 43-44. It's now 48-49. You'll see in the original agreement there was a request for additional funding. We've managed to get to the position where we've negotiated the fact that they don't need the additional funding. So the agreement itself will be drawn up by our legal advisor who's been advising us through the process. When the agreement's drawn up, there'll be a number of stipulations within that around having representation on the board of CLIC. The creditors' demands on the company have been significantly reduced. There's also an intention that both the loan, so in tandem with agreeing the new loan schedule, there will also be an agreement between CLIC and the landowners, which is Marshalls, and the management company, which is Greenwich Leisure Limited, for a 10-year extension to the existing leases. So that will then take us beyond the revised end of the loan period, so at least we're covered, so the link will still be operating. And the other stipulation that we're going to introduce, and CLIC are quite happy with this, is to review the loan agreement on a regular basis so that if finances allow, they can repay us early. So there's a number of sort of details to put in the agreement, and hopefully, I think they're all listed there, but that's what we're hoping to achieve. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair, and I can confirm that I'm much happier with an extension of time than when they wanted more money. So we'll have that categorically, that we will not extend their loan until the Marshalls and GLL is extended. So we will be after that, because hand in hand always worries me a bit of which goes first. So categorically, we will not sign until that has been signed, because what we don't want to do is extend it and then, you know, they not be able to get the extension. Especially with GLL and Marshalls and CLIC, it's very complex structures.
Yeah, so that will be the case. We'll make sure that it all happens at the same time. Sorry?
But we go last.
Well, it'll be a condition of us extending the agreement that they will have in place the 2 10-year agreements.
Please do, yes.
Just to add to that, I mean, obviously there is a proposal to relocate the Park and Ride site, and the ice rink is located within the Park and Ride site. The New Market Road Park and Ride site is actually owned by Marshalls, but we understand that Marshalls will allow the ice rink to stay, but clearly we want to make sure that that is going to be the case. So we do, in case anyone's wondering, aren't they going to relocate the Park and Ride? Yes, we know about that, and that's something that we've taken into account.
Okay, thank you. Happy for me to move on? Thank you, Councillor Heather Williams. Councillor Fane. It is.
Thank you, Chair. Just one item that I had expected to see referred to in this report, which isn't there, which is the effect of interest rates on the viability of the ice rink and on the cost of repayment of loans, cost of servicing loans. Is there a reason why that isn't dealt with in this report?
So the interest rate is fixed at 4.31% throughout the whole term. And that's so that was what was agreed from the outset.
So I will take your vigorous nodding, Councillor Fain, as we are okay to move on. And I have Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to look at risk. We know that this site has not been without risk in the past, and paragraph 19 says there is a risk. Obviously, we have to look at all risks. A risk that the loan repayments will not be made within the timescales stipulated. But this is common with all such arrangements. I would like to ask if we are considering a regular review process to see how the company is doing with its ability to repay the loan in the expected time frame, so that it doesn't come to the end of it and they say, no, we can't repay. I think we ought to be keeping an eye on it on a regular basis, but I don't know how that's achieved through legal agreements and whether it's possible to do that. But I asked the question, is it possible to keep an eye on that?
So we are going to make it a stipulation within the new loan agreement that we do review this on a regular basis, and CLIC were quite clear that they were happy with that, because in if they're able to repay early, then we get our money early and they pay us less money as well. So it is actually in the interest of both parties if finances allow. So yeah, there will be regular reviews and we'll make that clear as part of the agreement.
Thank you. If I may, Chair?
Yep, please do.
Thank you. That's reassuring, and I'd like to think there was a plan somewhere in the back of somebody's drawer that said what we would do if it looked as if it wasn't so rosy and it looked as if they couldn't pay back. But the other one is, if the park and ride moves, all of that free parking will be also removed, and I suspect in terms of a business decision, marshals will not want to leave much parking space because they'll want to develop it. So I'm just wondering what happens. Do we have some agreement with marshals about the minimum requirement for parking in order to keep the ice rink as a viable going concern?
Councillor John Williams or Peter Maddox?
Well, the agreement is between CLIC and marshals. We are not party to that agreement. So that's why we want the assurance from marshals that they will extend the lease and that the ice rink will stay there. It's down to the ice rink and marshals to determine. It's not for us to dictate to CLIC or marshals what arrangements they should make. Our interest in this is the loan, and our interest is to ensure that the loan is repaid, not how they operate the ice rink. We will have two members on the board, and clearly they will be able to have a say as to what happens, and will report back to us. But as I say, we don't control the ice rink. The ice rink is not controlled by us. We are simply a lender in this respect, and we want to make sure that our loan is protected. How the ice rink operates and how it repays that loan is a matter for the ice rink.
Yes, please, Councillor Bradnam, yes.
Thank you. Absolutely, thank you for that clarification, Councillor Williams. The reason I ask is that if usership drops consequent on loss of parking spaces, that will affect the ability to repay the loan. So hopefully the members on the board will be mindful of that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a point of information about the original agreement meant that we had a place on the board. I So I'm assuming we will have somebody that's going regularly. And it sounds like that's going to get finalised, because it was a bit of a grey area when we discussed it previously. It was it was there, but it hadn't got formalised. So hopefully this will bring some formality to it. But I think we have to remember who our loan is with. It's with Click. GLL will be responsible for the running and for the financing and what Councillor Bradnam is referring to. But our loan is not with GLL and the running of the business. Our loan is with Click, and they have other ways of dealing with things other than just going through GLL, if they so please. So that might alleviate there. It's just reminding, and also conscious new members, that this is not a straightforward process. We're not directly with the people running it. We have put a loan into the landlords, essentially, of it. So Click are responsible no matter what GLL and the running of it happens.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Milnes, your hand was up, I believe.
It was really to add the perspective of GCP in this, who would be responsible for any proposed move. And it seems to me that it would be very obvious for aiding the commercial viability of the ice rink that enough parking was remaining on that site to make sure that the ice rink was a continuingly viable option, because that would give clearly, if it wasn't viable, then marshals would lose out effectively anyway. So it's, I think, in everybody's interest, and it was very comforting to know that the ice rink recovered post-pandemic for its usage levels. So it continues to be quite viable right now. And I think it's in everyone's interest to maintain that viability.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. Sorry, just because benefit towards the GCP has been referenced, I just need to declare that I'm a member of the Greater Cambridge Partnership Assembly. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Would any other GCP relevant people like to say the same thing? Councillor Milnes, thank you very much. Excellent. Just, you know, as we mentioned. Okay, marvellous. So therefore, Councillor John Williams, is there anything else you wanted to add in relation to the ice rink that we haven't covered in that regard? No, that's what I thought, but just to make sure. Then again, we as a committee, we note that that report is there, and thank you very much for all that information and the answers you provided. Which brings us on to basically our final item on the agenda, which relates to our work programme, and obviously the documentation there regarding the work programme and the forward plan. But there is also the specific reference to the fact that Councillor Stobart and Councillor Bearpark, who has joined us, have submitted a request that the committee take up an interest in relation to Section 106 agreements and monitoring. So therefore, what I'd like to do at this point is ask whether it be Councillor Stobart or Councillor Bearpark, who would just like to explain to the committee briefly what it is that you would like the committee to be interested in, to engage in, and then perhaps we'll have a discussion in relation to that and decide if we wish to accept that as something that we're going to do. Councillor Bearpark.
Thank you, Chair. Since I became a councillor over a year ago, Section 106 seems to come up a lot. Certainly in my ward, where clearly there's...
Sorry, Councillor Bearpark, I'll just stop you there for a moment, just because I didn't ask you to introduce yourself. We haven't mentioned what your ward is. So
sorry.
Apologies, if you could do that first and then you can carry on. That was my mistake.
No, sorry, I'm member for Milton and Waterbeach. So, yes, I mean, there are a number of things coming forward in our ward which arise from Section 106 agreements, largely as a result of the new town development. Some of those are coming forward quite nicely. And there are new Section 106 agreements coming forwards with the other developer of Waterbeach Newtown. And I suppose this is an area that I'm learning slowly, but I'd like to learn a bit quicker. And I understand, you know, officers have responsibilities for reaching agreements and also for monitoring, you know, how those agreements, how Section 106 is carried out once the agreement has been reached. And I suppose because it's so important for Waterbeach Newtown coming forward, I'd be interested to, you know, see if there's not a possibility, and we've suggested a possibility of an item to examine how Section 106 agreements are reached and what sort of monitoring is taken by officers as, you know, multi-million-pound schemes are brought forward. As you said, Chair, this is a joint suggestion for an item with Councillor Stobart. Do you want to add some further words to that?
Councillor Stobart.
So the ward that I help represent, Girton, of course, is surrounded by Eddington and Darwin Green, has strong links with Histon. And it's in that context that, you know, I was concerned that the Section 106 agreements that had been agreed, for example, for Darwin Green 3 and for parts of Eddington, were not necessarily joining up. So, I mean, it's hard to future-proof things completely. But the notion of, well, do we have a vision for example, active travel in the Girton area that would allow students, for example, to travel safely between educational institutions and their home? Had that been thought about, for example, when Darwin Green was conceived, when Eddington was added, and so on, you know, could that have been done better so that we weren't, for example, now looking at Darwin Green 2 and 3 and thinking, well, actually that could have been better, that could have been, you know, the access to Welbrook Way and Girton could have been better planned. So I was concerned about how they all join up and how much you could future-proof a Section 106 agreement so that infrastructure might be emerging better adjusted. Things like trigger points, you know, very difficult to understand. If you're planning, and again, I'll come back to my favourite, this active travel network, what's the right trigger point for an active travel network when you're trying to encourage people to buy houses on a development and for them to think, you know, I can use my bike from the day I move in. If it's all kind of mud and just hope about the number of people who are going to move in, and then my cycleway will be there. No, I don't think that's correct. So I think some thinking around how these trigger points interact as well in relation to this multiplicity of Section 106 projects comes back to a point that Councillor Bear Park has raised, which is how do we conceive and monitor them? You know, what is it within our power? And we appreciate that for officers this is a big challenge. It's a monstrous kind of situation. You're being pushed multiple ways and with developers with very strong commercial agendas. But we would like to investigate and see if there's any way we can help the whole system to be better.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Milne, I'm conscious of your hand, but I wanted to first of all ask if there's anyone else on the committee who wanted to make any comment in relation to the proposal that Councillor Stobart and Councillor Bear Park have made, and then I was going to come to you, and then Liz Watts, I was going to come to you after I'd been via that. So Councillor Bradnam first.
Thank you. I think it's a very good idea that we look at this, but I'm just mindful of the thought that I can't remember off the top of my head the precise wording, but it's something like S106 is you know, as it were, a contribution made by a developer to mitigate the impacts of the development itself. And so I'm just mindful that when it goes into active travel, we're talking about travel between the new development and somewhere else. And sometimes that's quite hard to envisage until it's actually there on the ground where people might actually want to go. So, and also it's just, I'm anxious that it should not actually fall outside the purview of S106 payments. The other one is SIL, and I think that maybe is delivered in a slightly different way. But anyway, I'll let others have a think about that.
Okay. I will go to Councillor Heather Williams, and then I will go to Councillor Mills.
Thank you. I've got no issues with the 106 coming to us, just as long as if I could have a bit of reassurance just from officers, because we're always, with planning, and as a planning committee member, and Councillor Bradham, I'm sure others on here have been in planning at some point, we're always sort of told about how it's the planning authority and not the council, and it's a statutory function rather than a political function. Obviously, this is a scrutiny function of the statutory function. So to just make sure that we're not, as long as we're not, for well-meaning purposes, opening something that could be held in court against us, as they say, on that process. So long as officers are satisfied, then I see no harm in it coming through. Just conscious that what we will be talking about is potentially live applications as opposed to finished and completed. So it's just about where that line is, because I think also we would lose the point really if we were doing it after the horse is bolted, if it wasn't on live applications, but how we manage to balance that independence of the statutory function away from the political, and whether so with that in mind, if there is a problem, then perhaps actually the planning committee could have it as an agenda item if that is a problem, as opposed to scrutiny. I'm just open to the ideas. I just want to make sure that we are squeaky clean on what we're doing and we don't accidentally trip ourselves up, because I think the purpose that is being sought here is a very valid and good one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mills?
I'll defer to Liz because I think she may be saying something that I might also want to say, but we'll see.
Liz Watts?
Thank you, Chair. So my first thought here is that this is a really interesting subject for all members, and I personally think this would be better run as a sort of training workshop for all members to be able to, I suppose, scrutinise how we do things. It doesn't need to come through a scrutiny committee. I think what from what Councillor Bearpark and Councillor Hobart were saying, they want to understand more about the process and be able to engage with it more and understand why things haven't happened, and how they might happen in the future. I think that would be really interesting for all members. And so my suggestion is that it's a workshop that we get colleagues in planning to run for, that we open to everybody.
Councillor Mills, your hand is still up. I don't know if that's because you haven't taken it down.
So I want to just confirm that you won't see my notes here, but it says workshop for members on section 106. So as somebody that has been closely involved with 106 agreements in my ward of Salisbury, where we've got two significant developments going on there, I've been quite intimately involved in this, and I think that the idea of a workshop or training on Section 106, understanding the statutory requirements that Heather Williams was just referring to, for example, and including things that are going on elsewhere. So, for example, cycle routes. We just had a particular example in Salisbury where a cycle route into the village centre from a development on the side of the village is part of the Section 106 agreement. So that definitely has to be aligned with an active travel perspective from the county council. And I think, you know, their involvement in Section 106 agreements is a really interesting area that I think particularly people members on the planning committee need to be aware of, but a wider membership issue for everybody that's involved, because we've got developments all over the district. Thank you.
There's probably two things that we're talking about, I think. One is S106 agreements that are being negotiated and they're being discussed. And Councillor Heather Williams' point about not straying into sort of planning, I think is really important there. Because so I don't think Scrutiny should be looking at that, supervising the negotiation of 106 agreements. But we as members do need to be involved in that. And we've probably all got examples where we've been involved in Section 106 negotiations in one way or another. Improving our understanding of that, improving our sort of relations with the officers side of it on those negotiations, the planning officers, would be excellent, and that sort of workshops and training on that would be great. Possibly we need to have a little bit more think about it, about the potential role that Scrutiny could have, which would be a slightly different one of reviewing and sort of looking at the things holistically in a reflective way. That is really our role as a scrutiny committee. So before we maybe decide anything, we could have a little more reflection on that. The monitoring is, I think, a particularly important part of that. That's part of what the introduction was about, focusing on the monitoring, which is, I think, I'm sure we'll get some good advice on this, less of an issue for in terms of straying into planning. That is potentially something that we could be looking at as well, how those 106 agreements are monitored and how changes are managed. So I would certainly like to not exclude any role for scrutiny in looking at 106 agreements at this stage.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I think it might help if I gave a particular type of example, because one of the things I think is that we have found difficult in our ward is where S106, where conditions have been applied that, for example, require an improvement of a cycle route, but that delivery is done through Section 278 arrangements, which are simply the developer designs something, gives it to the county council, and the county council makes observations on road safety, and then they say, no, so you need to change this and adjust that and make that longer and make that shorter. And then they come back with different plans under 278, and eventually the county council signs it off as from their road safety team. But the problem with that, which might all be being delivered as an S106 condition, or as an S106 delivery, the problem is there's no public consultation. And it's that element of it that's been problematic. So it's not just S106, it's how that is delivered in the process. Now that might be statutory, and we might not have any influence on that at all. But if you can see, that is the sort of concern that we have locally about how the Section 106, I think that's why the element of monitoring is coming into it, because actually what's the problem is the lack of local consultation on how those Section 278 deliveries happen.
Thank you. I'm taking a couple more bits, I'm going to round it off and then we'll be done. So I've got Liz, I think your hand, I'm not sure who was first actually. Let's go to Heather. Let's go to Councillor Heather Williams first and then we'll go to Liz Watts.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually going to try and clarify something that Councillor Bradnam said, if that's okay, to sort of help understand. So what you're saying is the staggering where we have the discharging of conditions, and some of them will lead to that. So when a condition, an application is in, although there's not a statutory consultation, you can feed into that process. So this is something separate that you're struggling with, or is it a discharge condition in relation to drawing down the 106?
The latter. In other words, it's the way the process of delivery of what has been requested, as you say, as a condition that draws on the S106, it's how that is delivered that's the problem. it's the county councillors are familiar with this, and indeed any member who's been involved in something where that's the way it happens. It's quite complex, but that's an element that I'm concerned about, and I think it's what Councillor Bear Park and Councillor Stobart are interested in, as well as how because when we get a planning application at planning committee, very often we get a heads of term for the S106 as part of the planning application. And that's very helpful because it says basically what it requires, what that has required in order to draw it up is for people to say to the parish council, okay, if you're going to have this development right next to your village, what are the things that you think you need as in this community to mitigate the impact of the development? And the parish council, if they've got their heads together, says, oh, actually, we know we could do with extra open play space or extra indoor recreation, or we need a bus stop or a pavement that's lengthened to connect the two developments or something like that. But unless the parish council is really on the ball about what it needs, and some are great at this, but some are less equipped, then that S106 is harder for the S106 officer to deliver because they haven't got the ideas from the parish council. So that's all the stuff, I guess, that might come into this. It's how the process happens as well.
In that case, Chair, like I say, because some of this, it does feel, and I am, please bear with me, I'm trying to get us into the statutory process, because obviously there are ways in which we word conditions as planning committee that could perhaps help with this situation. But of course, there can always be an application to alter 106, alter, we quite often see pre-commencement become pre-occupation and the like. So they're all still live going on. Can I make a suggestion that this is obviously a really important issue, and that officers work with, and the councillors that have brought it forward to us, so we can really see what this is, because there are so many different variants ways and so many different departments and different functions. And like Councillor van der Veer says, I'm sure there is a role for scrutiny in this somewhere. There might just need to be a bit of work to find it, so that we don't interfere with the other processes. And maybe Stephen Kelly can give committee good advice on wordings of conditions.
Indeed. For me, that's part of the reason why councillors submit their form, we have the conversation, bring it to committee, and then we work out where we're going with it. I've got Liz Watts. Your hand was up a minute ago, Liz. I don't know if you've decided not to.
Just a thought, Chair. I mean, it feels like what I wonder whether it would be useful to collect all of the questions from this committee and potentially the wider member group around this issue, because it is a really complicated issue, and then allow us to run a workshop that kind of responds to those questions, and then for scrutiny to say, okay, what would we now, what are the elements that we now feel that we need to scrutinise? Because otherwise I fear that not all members are going to benefit from the knowledge that we could share and the challenge that you could give us, and also it potentially is a huge topic that's been presented, and I think we need to hone in on what you actually want to scrutinise.
Councillor Leeming, and I'm going to make that the last two. Councillor Bear.
Thank you, Chair. I think the idea of a workshop is an excellent idea. Very much support that. I think that would be fantastic. I think one of the reasons I brought this up was really just to try and ensure that, I suppose the agreements that are being reached with developers are the best they can be for achieving our local priorities. It feels like kind of 50% or more of my casework relates to Section 106 agreements, of which I had no input when they were reached. Are we learning lessons from the considerable number of agreements that have been reached in the past and then are, I don't know whether it's the right word, discharged later on? I know other councils have provided quarterly reports on Section 106 activity to the council. And I think to Councillor Stobart's question about, you know, are we ensuring that the different agreements are joined up correctly? And I think we can do this without referring to live Section 106 discussions and negotiations. It's more at a kind of higher level. It's just really understanding whether, you know, all the aspects are being, you know, are being attended to and have the resources that they need, and the council officers have the resources they need to deal with this, because obviously it's a massive area. And I suppose lastly, I wanted to just kind of consider the impact of rising construction costs and the risk of stagnant or falling housing prices, whether that's been actively considered, because that's obviously a hot topic at the moment as well.
Excellent, thank you. And Councillor Leaming, last separate word.
Thank you, Chair. I think perhaps I would like to sort of reiterate the idea that the training workshop would be an excellent idea, and I think opening it up to all members would be a really good plan. But I don't see this as an either or situation. I think that would be a really good starting point. But I would like this to remain as a scrutiny item. I think there's lots of things that we could look at as with a scrutiny, sort of a view of scrutiny. Things like monitoring of the implementation, overlaps between various Section 106s, timing, trigger points, lessons learned from previous Section 106s. I think these are all valid things that we could look at and learn from as both members, and if there's any areas where we need additional sort of resilience within an officer team.
Great, thanks very much. So my proposal would be, first of all, is it reasonable for me to suggest to everyone that there is agreement within the committee that we would like to take on board Councillor Stobart and Councillor Bearpart's initial suggestion and to find a way forward with that, and that we're not rejecting it? Do we agree to that? Okay, great. I've said that in the loosest way to begin with. So thank you very much for that. So it seems to me that we are then agreeing that Liz Watt's suggestion of a training, I want to say seminar, and then I realised that wasn't really the right word. Member workshop. Thank you, Councillor Heather Williams. Yes, a member work. No, because it's not. And then member workshop, which would be, as Liz suggested, where everyone could put forward whatever it was they wanted to ask at this stage. And then I come back to the points that have been made at the end there by Councillor Bearpark and Councillor Leaming, that is the starting point. But until we have done that, we perhaps don't have that bigger picture of understanding, but we're also not kind of rejecting the points that Councillor Bearpark made at there and Councillor Leaming made towards the end, of that there is a role for scrutiny in this, of looking at this, the wider issue, whilst also taking into account Councillor Heather Williams' points, very much related to making sure that we follow the tram lines that we're able to operate in, and we don't depart from them in the way that would be problematic. And I'm also very much struck by Councillor Bradnam's reference to a specific example, which obviously is very current and pertinent within the Milton Waterbeach ward. Yes, Councillor Bradnam.
Would it be useful to have a report or just an update, not anything very complicated, but just an update on to the next Scrutiny and Overview meeting that says what we are going to do, having had a big discussion about it?
My thought would be for Councillor Cohn and myself to have a conversation with Liz Watts or whoever to see that we can put on the member workshop as soon as possible, and that doesn't mean like tomorrow, but as soon as possible. Now, if that means that we're able to do that ahead of that meeting on the 15th of December, which would be quite a push, but nothing is absolutely impossible in life, then we'll be able to do that. If it becomes the case that that actually becomes a January item at this stage, then our update on the 15th of December would be a much smaller thing, and we'd be coming in January with more. Okay, so I will move us on from that item, which means number 12, as I've just mentioned, to note the date of the next meeting, which is Thursday the 15th of December at 5:20 p.m. Thank you very much. We then have exclusion of press and public, but as we don't have anything to discuss in that regard. Yes, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. It's just something to potentially throw out there, that I'm conscious that I work for my mother, so she will cope with whatever time I finish, but there are other members that have had to come in late or just making it. I'm just wondering if we were to make it 5:30, whether those that are working sort of 9 to 5 would then gives them half an hour at least to get here, because South Cambs is, we're not in the city, we are quite rural, and that means that not everywhere is within a 15-minute drive. I mean, it took me over an hour today, but just wondering if 5:30, as other evening meetings sometimes are, would be better for people.
I have no particular view. Okay. Yes, again, if I can say that, Councillor Cohn and I will have that conversation with Ian as the officer related to the scrutiny overview, and we will see where we go from there. It may not be possible for the December meeting, but it may be something to get in from the January meetings onwards. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our agenda, and I always at this point turn to Ian and I say, Ian, is there anything I have failed to do or missed out completely? Yes, you see, there is something that I failed to do and missed out completely, which is why I always turn to him. Obviously, as you are aware, Councillor Cohn and I are unable to attend the Cabinet meeting at which a report needs to be presented on the 12th of December 2022. Is there anyone on the committee who is going to be attending that meeting and would be willing to take on the role of either presenting or answering questions?
You should have asked that at the beginning of the meeting, so that anybody could have taken notes with a view to reporting.
Well, you have. That's what Mr. Senior is here for. Is there anybody who's going to be attending the Cabinet meeting on the 12th of December who would be able to represent the committee? This is.
I can do it if you like.
We will come back to that conversation after the meeting. Okay, thank you very much. So, Ian, I have failed in that one, I'm afraid, but we will come back to that at some point. In that note, thank you very much, members, for your extended participation this evening. Obviously, if we ask lots of questions and we require lots of answers, then we make our meeting last a long time. And I appreciate all of the things that have gone on this evening. Thank you to officers for your time this evening. Thank you to Cabinet colleagues for staying throughout the meeting. And the meeting is therefore